Man these shields, boys! Remember this day, men, for it will be yours for all time.
Welcome to the night zone, hear the warriors speak. Life's the battlefield and we ain't feeling weak. From love to the game and the power we seek. Our voice is strong, breaking every peak. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Talk of love and battle scars, everything that's real. From touchdown to sermon, you know the deal. Strength in every word we begin to reveal. Truth in every tale as our lives we unveil. Protect and provide, we're knights in the fray. Nothing off limits, we got something to say. Life and love, fitness and fight all day. Guys Night Podcast.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the Guys Night Podcast. Today, we're doing a special edition with Sacred Conversations. Instead of going live this week, we're going to have a sit-down and a long-standing conversation to bring you Richard. So, Richard, welcome to the show. Tell us a little about yourself and what you do.
All right, my name is Rich Swiger, and I work as a state contractor for the Department of Corrections. Am I doing this wrong already?
Hold on,
it didn't take long.
Did you guys hear how he introduced himself? Did he say Rich? He said Rich.
Well,
He skipped but he made it clear to me.
I got that from you.
All right, sorry about that, man. Go ahead, Rich. Tell us.
Ricardo.
Here we go.
All right, so my name is Richard Swiger. I work as a state contractor for the Department of Corrections with Prison Fellowship. Prison Fellowship is the nation's largest nonprofit for prisoners. It was started by Chuck Golson. I've been working with them. I'm the senior contact for Ohio, so I spent almost 5 years as a field operator, as a director for the field. And I've been an academy director at Grafton Correctional now for a couple of years, which is a pretty interesting story because I actually used to live there. So I have an office in the unit I used to live in, and I can lean over my desk and see a cell that I used to live in. And in fact, the guy I used to cell with is still in there 15 years later doing a life bit.
Holy smokes.
So-
Talk about the circle of life, right?
Right.
And then Sean, obviously, joining us as well. Sean, welcome aboard, brother.
I'm glad to be back. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Sean, thanks for hooking us up with Rich and getting this opportunity to talk to him. And then finally, of course, David, welcome.
Let's rock.
Awesome. So I guess let's get into that.
Where do you start?
Well, let's start with what is it like every day going to work and looking across and realize that you used to be behind those bars?
Well, I snitch now. No, I'm just kidding.
Look at all the stitches.
Like I never did before, but now, No, what's funny is that it's like no man's land because, sometimes the staff, there's three type of staff members: the ones that hate you, the ones that like you, and the ones that could care less. And going back in was such a weird place. It's like a gray area because, on the one hand, I spent so many years following rules and going through the motion and waiting for my release and, getting up in the morning and going through the regular routine of being in prison and incarcerated in the same place and Groundhog Day and all, and going through that. And now going back in as a leader and actually being handed keys and being given security rights and having a cell phone and doing the things that state contractors do, it's different. I mean, I've had situations where I've had to act as a staff member, but the men also know that I'm on their side. So it's somewhere in between. And I'll never forget the first time I ever walked across the prison yard by myself. I was walking out to process out of the prison, and it was count time, so all the inmates are locked down. Most of the COs are in the units, and there's very little traffic on the yard. And in fact, that particular day it was pretty windy and chilly, and I was walking across the yard by myself, and I swear I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone.
I can imagine. Now, how long were you locked up for?
I did 2 numbers, but altogether in the state of Ohio, I did about 15 years in Ohio, and I did 3 out of state. So I got about 18 years of lockup.
Wow. I'd imagine, everybody's different, but I imagine that really helps you kind of connect with some of these guys that probably in the back of their mind think they're just never going to get out, or it feels like it at least.
Sure. Yeah, they want people that are able to go out and succeed, to be able to come back and say, it's almost like Noah's bird coming back, like, look, there's life, It's being able to go out and do the right thing and be a part of society and live according to the rules and pay your taxes and do your job and stay out of trouble, and then being able to come back and say it's worth it, and you can do it too. If I can do it, you can do it. Because my story actually is pretty incredible on how I ended up in the position that I ended up in, because it was a series of literal miracles that got me there. And
To where you're at now, you're saying?
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm a firm believer in Christ. I'm a firm believer in the Bible. I've listened to some of your podcasts. I know that there's some back and forth about that, and I'm not going to browbeat anybody into the kingdom.
Sure.
That's not what I'm here for. If I could, everybody would understand Christ like I understand him, but obviously we all have independent choices. But literally how I got to where I got to was miracle after miracle after miracle after miracle.
So let's, obviously every journey needs a beginning. So let's talk about the previous life. Like, how did you end up doing, 18 years in prison? Where did that start at for you?
I came from a dysfunctional, abusive home, which is a very common story in a lot of people that go through the prison system. I grew up without a father, which is, again, common in going to prison. But all of that started early on my mother's side. My mother's father, my grandfather, went off to the South Pacific during World War II. He came back a raging alcoholic and a violent drunk, and that caused our family to spin out of control. Prior to that, he was an upstanding citizen. He owned his own home. He had a beautiful family, wife and kids. But when he came back a raging, angry, violent alcoholic, and abused his family so much so that carried on in a cycle that, my mother, again, abused me because she was abused. And so, that cycle impacted me. At the age of 2, I had a sister die in a bed next to me from neglect. That caused my mother and father to get a divorce. I came from a divorced home. My mother sank deep into depression and booze and pills, and the state of Massachusetts took me and my siblings away, placed us in foster care. And in the early 1970s, the foster system was very unregulated. It wasn't as regulated as it is now. So there were a lot of abuses happening and a lot of things that I could speak about. I was sexually abused going through the system. I ended up in over 10 foster placements. And then around the age of 6, I was put in a group home until I was 12.
Wow.
And then at 13, I committed my first felony arrest. I was released at 12, and within the year, me and some other kids decided we were going to break in a house and break in a building, and we got caught, and I ended up getting probation. They gave me 2 years, 1 year suspended, 1 year to serve, 1 year suspended. How did that go? I'm sorry. It was 2 years, 1 year suspended, 1 year on probation with court costs and fines. But I was from the city. I was from the urban city. Urban city kids don't pay fines. We smoke dope. We drink kegs. We chase girls, but we don't pay fines.
Right.
So, it carried over from 13 to 14, from 14 to 15, 15 to 16. I was on one form of supervision or another from 1981 to 2016. I was on parole or probation.
Wow. Well, it's interesting too. You say, a lot of people today complain about a lot of the systems that we have in place, right? One of them being foster homes in that system. And obviously it's not perfect. Unfortunately, there's just too many kids that need parents and not enough people that are able to be good parents. But to think about how far it's come in the last 30 years, 40 years, hopefully it's gotten a little bit better.
It has.
There's some regulations to that. There's some people overseeing it but I can't imagine, like at 13 years old, you're in a scenario like you said, well, what 13-year-old pays fines in general, let alone
exactly
people from the inner city that are in kind of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you're 13, your first mistake. You obviously learned from it and didn't do anything wrong again, right?
Wrongish. So where a lot of young teenage kids would be like embarrassed getting put in the back of a cop car, I'll be honest with you. You ever see that commercial back in the day was like, nobody ever says they want to be a junkie when they grow up, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
I was like, that's not true, because I always wanted to be a junkie, because all the adults around me were all abusive, alcoholic addicts. And when that's the model you see, you aspire to that. Like, you naturally acclimate to that kind of a lifestyle. So I was like, when can I smoke dope? You know what I mean? And at 13 to 14 to 15, I was getting high and running around and doing stupid things, wasn't paying attention in school, was getting in fights, getting suspended, getting in trouble. At 16, my father came on the scene for the first time in years. And
real quick before you start that part, sorry, I don't mean to cut your story off. So when you're 13, you're out of the boys' home, but are you back in a foster care at that point?
No, I'm living with my mother.
Oh, you're actually living with your mom at this point.
Yeah, and she had remarried a guy who was an alcoholic. He was a decent worker. He was a nice guy, but he was a fallen down drunk. And there's things that go behind all that too. But
sure.
There wasn't any real role model in my life at that point. And it's strange because as I think back to all of it, the household I grew up in with my mother Marcy, my stepfather Tom, and then my brother Kenny, my sister Christine, they're all dead. Every one of them died either in addiction or for some horrible circumstance. And even the dog is dead, right? So the whole household is gone, and I'm like the sole survivor. They never got to see the successes that I'm living, and that's a real shame. But
and you didn't get to help them either.
Exactly.
Like now you're in a position where like, shit, I could do something about it, but I can't.
Yeah. And so my father comes on the scene, and the interesting thing about that is that my mother, I'll remember this for the rest of my life. We must have been getting on her nerves one day because she pulled up in the old station wagon, the wood
panel. My neighbor had
She
one.
pulled up with the old station wagon at this job site, and me and my sister must have been bickering. She's like, "Shut up. Look up there. You see that guy on the roof? That's your father. You want something? Ask him. Get out." And so that's the introduction I had to my father the first time since he left when I was 2 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And
15 years later.
Well, he showed up one time when I was 9, took me to a bar, gave me a pitcher of beer, and then I took me home drunk.
Oh my gosh,
all right,
man.
So yeah,
What my question is he a roofer? What's he doing on the roof?
Yes, he was roofing.
Okay.
And so I showed up and he's like, "You picked up some shingles," and thumbs up, now I'm a laborer. But it was for a young, impressionable, kicked around youth who really didn't have his head on straight. I mean, literally, I wasn't raised to be the normal kid. Like I had been in group homes and foster homes, and I was mixed up. And I didn't know how to approach this father-son relationship except to just be there, And so he was the mad dog 2020 drinking cigarettes, Pall Mall smoking drunk who lived in a one-door apartment with a whole bunch of other drunks. And he was collecting welfare month to month and then working odd jobs. And so there was this whole climate of the first of the month, the checks comes in and everybody goes and gets drunk for 2-3 days on a bender, and then they're broke for the rest of the month and wait for the check again, right?
Wow.
This was the lifestyle that I was like living at that age. And within the first year of my being around him, like in May of 1986, he was murdered in an arson fire that I was supposed to actually be there that night, but I was out tripping on mescaline, and I went out and stayed out all night. I kind of laugh about it now, but it was actually very tragic at the time because it ripped my heart out. I was just getting to know this human being that, he was tall, he was handsome, he was funny, he was a biker, he hung around with certain people, but he was a free bird, and you couldn't nail this guy down, and he didn't want to be responsible, and he womanized and slept around, and that kind of bled into me, like this is who I want to be. I want to just run around, sleep around, do drugs, do whatever. And the morning after his murder, I'm sitting in an alternative high school class because I had been kicked out of regular high school for violence. I'm sitting in alternative high school, and the teacher says something to me about homework, and I get up and I throw my desk at his face. And they pile on me and hold me down and put me in an ambulance and cart me off, because I flipped out over my dad's death. And it wasn't that I was hurting.
Yeah,
I was a
of course.
teenager that was my cry of pain. It wasn't that I was psycho. I didn't need to be psychiatrically treated because I wasn't nuts. I was just hurting at that time. But I did 90 days of evaluation, and it was something.
Well, and to go back to that time, obviously things have changed a lot since then, but we just had a couple of guys on here locally that are from the Medina County All Hazard team, and we talked about PTSD. And Brad, who was the lieutenant who joined us, he's like, yeah, we created basically it was a Medina County PTSD unit, right, for, sheriffs, police, firefighters, EMT, because of all the stuff they see. But I bring that up in the sense of people don't realize the PTSD that a kid going through that life has, right? I mean, it's not like you experience that for the first time at 15 or 16. There was like years of that built up and loss and take away and give and take away. And so I can only imagine, what 16-year-old is prepared to handle that loss when they finally feel like, despite the fact you probably didn't have all your shit together, it kind of felt like it maybe, like, oh, my dad's in my life. This is this cool dude. And you lose that right away. And it's like, there's nobody there to help you, especially this is what you're a young guy, probably 80s.
Not only did I not have my act together, all right, I didn't have an act to get together. Just kind of answer your question about having it together. I wasn't prepared to have a life at all because all of the patterns around me were dysfunctional. Marriages breaking up, people selfishly getting high all day, nobody working a steady job, nobody paying bills, nobody knowing to own a home, nobody, just the normal how to go out and buy a car. None of that was going on around me. Everybody was living the paycheck to paycheck, siphoning off the government, and I'll even tell you, you've heard me say this, like I talk about my Christianity pretty matter-of-factly, and I'll tell people that I went down on the floor Democrat and rose up a Republican. That's just how it happened for me, because I went from being a whiny, complainy, needy, freak flag flying, do whatever you want, to no, wait a minute, there's some rules and you should obey them and take responsibility. And if I do that, maybe I can get the reward of having a decent life. So that's not to pick on people on the left or Democrats or anything like that. That's just to say that's the lifestyle that I lived, and then I switched and I said, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. There are some morals and there are some rules, and I'll live by those. And the way that happened was, so my dad gets murdered. I have a caseworker from the alternative high school take an interest in me, and she's like, I can't go back to school, obviously. I violently threw a desk at my teacher and tried to take his hat off, and they're like, you can't come here anymore. So there was very little options for an urban city nut at that time for me to get anywhere.
Sure.
So she was like, you ever hear of Job Corps? And I was like, sign me up. So I went to Job Corps in Chicopee, Massachusetts, which was stationed on the Westover Air Force Base. And it was a program not aligned with the Air Force at all. It was a program run by the government to help kids get a vocation, a GED if they needed one, get a driver's license, and kind of get thrust towards a career. And I went through that program. And while I was there, I was 17, 18 years old. While I was there, this local church came in with a Christian rock band, and they played this. I just remembered for the rest of my life. I remember to this day. There was this guy standing on stage with a big white Rickenbacker bass. He was handsome, had a beautiful wife, gorgeous kids, and he's up there, and they're all singing and praising the Lord. And I'm like, man, I'd like to be like that, happy, playing a bass and being good looking, having a nice looking wife, And then he said, Psalm 68 says that God is father to the fatherless. And I was like, wait a minute. The God of the universe is talking to me right now, because I just lost my dad. So he must be looking right at me right now. So when they did the altar call, I was like, yeah, count me in or cut it out. I want some of that. And I went up and responded to that. But just like I teach men in prison, you can do things the wrong way. You can get a job the wrong way. You can ask a woman to marry you the wrong way. You can gather friends around you the wrong way. And I went to Christianity the wrong way. I thought I was the answer to Christianity. God thought I was special. I was going to fix it. I had all the answers, right? So I was being called to fix Christianity. And when I did the prayer, I was like, okay, Father, I accept you. Here's what I want. I want a fast car. I want a hot chick. I want lots of money, plenty of dope to smoke. And you give me all that, I'll follow you for the rest of my life.
Sure.
And when the God of the universe was like, well, hold on a second, Sonny, you need to pay your taxes, get a job, take responsibility, and quit being a lame, and go to church and be a nice guy. And I'm like, no, I'm not reading my Bible. This is for lames. I got to go.
Yeah.
What, I know you said you were 17, but what what years were this? Like going back to, being at school and throwing a chair at a teacher's face?
That would have been around 1984.
Yeah.
84?
Yeah.
Okay.
84. And then 86, I'm going through Job Corps through 86, 87.
Rich, you've shared your story a couple times with me, but I know you've kind of glossed over some of the stuff, some major things that have happened in your life. But one of them, like losing your dad that night, just the environment that you're with, that crowd of people, he lost his life over a couple bucks.
Yeah. So the way that this happened, when I first met my father on the roof, he was married to this woman, Lori, and he was living on, get this, Welcome Street. So I felt pretty welcome, right? He's living on Welcome Street. But within a couple of weeks of living with him, me and my sister moving in with him, if you want to call it living, he left his then wife, Lori, and he went and ran off with this chick, Leslie. Go figure. This is exactly what he did to my mother, right? So he moved over into this, like the worst section of town, 4th Avenue in Haverhill, Massachusetts, which was the ghetto. A one-room apartment with a bathroom and a kitchen and one door in and out. And it was a crash pad for all the drunks in the town. Even Crazy Mike went there. And if you were from Haverhill, you knew Crazy Mike was a guy that came back from Vietnam and went around shouting at the sky. He even found his way in this place, right? They're all there, right? It was like a funny farm. And, but the night that he got killed, like I said, I went out with my cousin Richie and we were tripping all night. And I woke up in the morning being told of the fire and his death. And the story that I heard is that he had actually escaped out the window, but then heard his girlfriend screaming for him, and he went back in to save her and died of smoke inhalation. But it was because it was around the first of the month. They liked to drink and party and play cards and gamble, and some guy lost $4 in a hand of poker and started to raise a riot about it. And my father beat him down and threw him out of the house. And he came back later that night with a can of gasoline and torched the house for $4.
Holy shit.
And my father died, and 3 other people died in that fire. So he died essentially for $1.
$4
Yeah,
man.
$4. And that ripped my young heart out. Like I was seething with anger. And I just felt like, I can't get a break in this life. I can't get stability. I can't have somebody wrap their arms around my broken self and just be there. I didn't have a grandmother. I didn't have a grandfather, no aunt, no uncle. They were all drunks and they all had the same disease. And so, I go through Job Corps. There's this big altar call. I go up and I accept Christ, but I can't live it because it's the whole gamut of, the 10 Commandments, never tell a lie, you got to be a good person, how you be a Christian. And I'm like, I don't even know how to be a human being. So see ya. I want to chase some girls and snort some lines and go have some fun. I'm not doing church. See ya. So I took off back into society and, very quickly became a crackhead. This was right around the time of 88, 89 when crack started getting real prevalent. And I got lost on the streets for years. I was homeless, running around. I learned how to break in and manipulate and steal from my addiction and in skipping forward, through a bad marriage. I got a girl pregnant and asked her to marry me because I thought that's what men do, right? We get people pregnant and then ask to marry, right? and that ended up being a really toxic relationship that I brought 2 kids in the world. And then there was a girl next door situation where I brought another baby in the world. Now I'm stacking up problems. And all 3 of them were raised without me. One, because I refused to take ownership of that child. And I was like, get on out of here, girl. I was a caboose on a train of dudes. Figure me out. See ya, And then, she didn't put my name on the birth certificate, so that absolved me of any responsibility. Which I was like, yay, I don't have to worry about that. So, and that's a horrible way to think. Now that I look back at it,
Sure.
And then,
but at that time, everything that you're going through, selfish individual.
It's selfish.
Yeah,
it's all I was, all me. And then the other 2 that I brought in the world, they ended up getting taken out of our custody. Me and my wife split up. We're living in separate shelters. We can't get along. The kids get separated, and they just ended up in the Vermont adoption registry.
Holy
I
shit,
ended up
man.
getting, in 1996, I walked into a convenience store in Southern Ohio with my finger in my pocket, and I told the clerk, "Hey, do you work here?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Give me the money in the register. I'm going to blow your brains out." When you tell somebody that you're going to blow their brains out, they have a place for you.
Yeah.
A very special place, right? And I learned that real quick. I'm like, "Oh, Ohio don't play," right? They threw a book at me, right? So I ended up going to court and pleading out on a 4 to 15, and I went to CRC in 1996. And
4 to 15 for threatening somebody with a finger.
Well, that's not how it's looked at. When
I get that.
When
They
you
don't-
threaten to murder somebody, they got something for you.
Yeah.
And they gave me, I ended up doing 5.5 years. I opened up Noble Correctional in 1996. I was 853rd guy through the gates back then. And it was on fire back then. It was nuts. And I spent 5.5 years shooting tattoos, hanging out with the homeboys, making foxies and drinking hooch and freaking black and milds and playing spades and writing poetry and longing for the streets. And all I did was wait 5.5 years for them to say, "Pack it up." And I went out the doors angrier, bitter, and more ready to hurt people than when I first went in.
And highly educated in how to live in the streets with nothing.
Highly educated on how to hurt people
Yeah.
and take advantage of people and manipulate and con people. And within 8 months of my release in 2001, I got released 2 weeks after 9/11. And within 8 months, I was facing a life sentence for 2 aggravated burglaries, a felony 2 kidnapping, and a robbery.
Holy
and,
shit.
And I was guilty for all of it because I was back on cocaine and trying to steal things to support a habit. I broke in a house over on River Styx Road. I don't make any bones about the fact that I was a scumbag.
Sure.
And I deserved everything I got. And in fact, I probably should have got even more. But I broke into a garage to steal tools. There was some innocent girl sleeping on the second floor. It was an occupied structure. When she woke up, I told her, "Shut up, sit down," and then began a process of trying to take her money. She had a house that was detached from the garage, so that's 1 burglary, 2. Right, going from the house to the garage is 2.
Right.
And then she said, "Do you want to go to the ATM machine? I'll give you money." And I'm like, "Sure." That's an abduction and
She offered you?
It doesn't. Yeah, she offered, but
Well,
it
hell
doesn't.
yeah. She's just like, what can I do to get out of this safely?
Well, and you know what? I don't want to diminish this because it doesn't even matter that it's a podcast.
Right.
Anyone I tell people, I scared her.
Yeah, of course.
And I terrified her. Probably put her on prednisone for the rest, or Prozac for the rest of her life. I'm ashamed of that. That is
Sure.
not funny, and it's not. I'm guilty of that, and I have to live with that. But I did spend the entire time that I was terrorizing and burglaring the situation, whatever, telling her I'm not going to hurt you, and trying to reassure her because I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted money for drugs, and it's it came out in court when I was in the courtroom in Medina. The way that played out that day is they asked the prosecutor what should happen, and the prosecutor's like, "You should get at least 20 years." And then they went to my lawyer, my public defender, and like, "What do you think?" And he's like, "Well, he did confess, so I think he should get a lesser sentence." Then they went to her, and I could care less at the time what the prosecutor said. I wasn't really afraid of my lawyer, but man, she terrified me.
Yeah.
And she was just this little thing, and when she spoke, it just crushed me because I thought she was going to come out with all kinds of mother rule,
Right.
and instead she was like, "It would be easier to send Mr. Swiger to prison if he wasn't such a nice guy." And I was like, "Are you kidding
man.
me? Wow, man." She crushed me. And there was some things happening in the middle of this situation. I married the daughter of the chaplain of the county jail that I went through.
I thought you were just going to say you married her daughter. I was about
No,
to shit.
how
I
crazy
was
would
like,
that be?
Whoa,
But yeah,
whoa.
Yeah, but I
but-
ended up going through that county jail here in Medina. I ended up beginning to make some serious decisions. Getting a 4 to 15 was one thing, but when you're facing a life sentence, it's like, maybe I'm doing life wrong here. I need to maybe make some different choices, So I started literally looking into scripture and literally looking into who I am as a person. And maybe I made a wrong way back in 86 when I made a, kind of a light decision. And there was a chapel service I went to, and the chaplain put this VHS in. That's how long ago it was. They put this VHS in, and this guy gets something. This New Zealand preacher, Ray Comfort, You know who that is? He goes around with Kirk Cameron. He does this whole Way of the Master series. And he says in this sermon, he's like, the problem with most people is that they spend their life comparing themselves to other people. Mm-hmm. And that was me. You know what? Compared to that pedophile, I don't look so bad. Yeah, I've smacked a few people around, robbed a few people. I didn't hurt no kids. And, you know, compared to the murderer, I don't look so bad. Yeah, I've hurt a few people, but I ain't never killed no one yet. They're the bad ones.
Right.
Me, I'm okay. I've committed some acceptable crimes here. You know what I mean? And that's how I looked at it. But
Sure.
when the preacher said, but that's not how God looks at it. The way he looks at it is, the pedophile isn't the standard of the human race. The murderer isn't who we're being compared to. We're being compared to Jesus Christ, the perfect sacrifice. And when you're compared to that lens, we all fall short. And I was like, wow, I get it now. It's my problem. I'm the problem. And it's the same message I tell everybody. Authority's not the problem. You're the problem. And when you can wake up and see that, you can change it. You can't fix yourself if you're beginning with a broken foundation and you think you're the one that's okay.
Sure.
So on the floor of a dirty cell in 2002 with my head next to a toilet, I went back to the cross and I said to Jesus, I said to God, I said, I don't need a hot chick, a fast car, lots of money. I need you. If I can get you, everything else will fall into place. And either change me right now or go ahead and kill me. I'll take death. I just don't want to take prison no more. I'm sick of it. So change me so I can get out and stay out, or just kill me. And I didn't feel any fairy dust. It wasn't like I felt a tingling sensation or everything got warm and changed. There was no magic miracle. I got up off the floor, snotty mess, angry, and still facing life in prison. But the difference was, it was almost like the Matrix, like I had taken the pill that finally woke me up so that when I cracked the Bible, I wasn't looking for me anymore. Do you get that? Like, we spend life thinking that we're God, that we're supposed to be sitting on the throne. Somebody is sitting on the throne of every one of our lives. And if it's not God, who do you think it is? Most people think, well, it's the devil. No, it's not. It's you. And the devil's whispering in your ear, you're God. You're God. You're the thing. And we're tricked into thinking, well, the whole world should worship me. More women, please. More drugs, please. More pleasure, please. And we want worship. But once I figured out that I was just a bit actor in Christ's play, then I was able to look at it and go, wait a minute, he's the big king and I'm just the guy on the sidelines, and the pressure's off. Right. He's the one that we worship, and he's the one that deserves it. So
you said this was 2002 that you made this decision. So this is what, 2 years into your second sentence at this point?
This is 8 months into being in the county jail. And really the thing that really stirred this whole pot was I'd called home. I had heard that message about, you compare yourself, and I was on the fence because I wanted to be a Christian, but I was afraid to. Becoming a Christian means being honest, right?
Yeah.
And when you're facing a life sentence, you don't want to go, yeah, I did it. Go ahead and throw the book at me. You're still like in denial. Like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm afraid because I could go to prison for the rest of my life. So I was stuck. God knew my heart, wanted to choose him, but I was afraid. And so God maneuvered in such a way that I accidentally snitched on myself. And watch how this happened. So I had a bunkie, Charlie, who at that time we were 3 months in a cell together playing cards and kicking the bobo and hanging out and whatnot. And he tells me what he's in there for. He's like, yeah, man, I'm in here because, high-speed chase, driving without a license, under disability and all that. And so I'm looking at 3 years, and I'm like, oh, yeah, well, here's what I'm in here for. And I told him everything. And he was like, oh. And he went to his lawyer and said, man, this dude just confessed everything to me. Give me a deal, and I'll tell you everything this dude said. So when my lawyer came to me and put the file in front of me, like, what's this Charlie telling me you did everything? I thought you said you were innocent. Right. I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to let Charlie get a deal, so I'm going to confess, right? So I told everything on myself. And, but it was a good thing, though, because it allowed me to get honest. And I wanted to get honest, but I was afraid. Mm-hmm. And that kind of pushed me into having no choice. God really maneuvered it in a way for me to not only tell on myself, but then he rewarded me for it. And that's really awesome. So I accidentally spilled the beans. I'm now looking at my judge. I tell my lawyer everything. I'm like, okay, you know what? Here's what happened, and I tell him everything from the time I'm born, through all the addiction and all the alternative school, my father's death, and everything. And here's where we are today. And a tear comes down his face, and he says, "I've been doing this for 10 years, and I've never felt as emotional as what you just told me, and I'm going to fight for you, and I'm going to get you 7, 8, or 9. Will you take 7, 8, or 9? I'm like, I'm looking at life. Yeah, I'll take 7, 8, or 9. Bet. Get that bit for me, you know? So he goes off to talk to the prosecutor, and I go to call home, and this is where things change. I go to call home to tell a friend of mine, I'm not coming home. His name is Jimmy. When I got out of group home when I was 12, his mom and my mom were best friends, so he and I became real good, close friends. And Jimmy and I were friends since the age of 12, right? And now I'm 27 years old, and I'm calling him to tell him I'm, well, I wasn't 27. No, I'm 34. I'm around 34, and I'm telling him I'm going back for 9 more years.
Fuck.
And I call home to tell him, and his people tell me he put a needle in his arm with a speedball, and his heart blew up, and he died. Oh. And I was the one that introduced him to getting high. And it crushed me.
Yeah.
It crushed me. Like, I mean, literally, dude, I sat in the day room of the county jail, and when I heard that news, I sat down at the table, and I was absorbing that, and I went to eat my lunch, and I just broke. Years of pain and anguish just came out all at once, and I just, you'd have thought you heard it. It must have been an ugly wailing cry, man, because everybody was like, oh, and I was just, and it all just came out, snots and tears and groaning pain of all the loss. And I got up from my tray, I went in my cell, and I laid on the floor, and I just cried out to God. And that's when I asked him to be my father. And I said, either change me or kill me, because I can't keep doing this. And it did. He changed my perspective on who I am in his eyes. I'm a wretch. I'm broken, but I'm also a prince, and I'm also loved, and I'm also special and unique in his sight. So we're all broken, but we all are made in his image. Mm-hmm. And things began to change. And so I went back to prison. I got 9 flat. And I decided day one I wasn't going to do it typical. I still got in fights. I still had a bad attitude. I still hung around with some real crazy characters. I was the lead singer in a Hell's Angels band. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that goes behind all that. But I ended up spending more time in the chapel, more time reading the Word, going to Ashland University, getting a 2-year degree. I was in a lot of metal bands because I got vocals, but and it changed.
Yeah, to belt them out.
Yeah, it changed my heart though, and so the interesting thing that happened was that when I was going through the reception center in Lorraine, let me back up. The female chaplain of the county jail, her name is Sue. I was in her office one day, and her daughter came in to get some keys.
Oh, here goes. Cue the porn music here.
Do it. Yeah, I was like 3 days without a shower, wearing orange and a 5 o'clock shadow. I was not up for a date. But she came in and got keys and left, and then her mom was like, that's my daughter Debbie. She just got back from Pensacola Christian College. She doesn't have a boyfriend. I'm thinking, why are you telling me?
Yeah, right.
Like, why are you telling me all this? And so I just said to her, well, I'm going to prison forever and a day. If she wants to write, I could use a pen pal. And I left it at that. So I'm at Lorraine, and I get a letter under the door from Debbie, and I'll remember it for the rest of my life because it was a card with a cat sitting behind a desk with a bunch of work, and I don't know what the joke of the card was, but inside she had wrote, I hope your situation has improved. I'm like, yeah, it's gotten great. Yeah, this doing time thing is so sweet, And so I wrote her back, and she wrote me, and we began this pen pal friendship that turned into more of a romantic love affair through the mail. And 2 years after writing her, I mailed her a Hallmark, like, duh. I felt like Rocky, like, hey, yo, Adrian, you want to get married or something, And I popped the question in a Hallmark card, and she wrote back and said she would wait for me and marry me. And I married her the day I got out of prison in 2011. And today we have almost 6-acre farm over on West Smith. And, we have 3 little boys, 12, 11, and 7. and we're doing it, man. 13 years of marriage. You know, my whole world has changed.
That's
I'm not who I used to be.
incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's one way to turn a bad situation into a really good one. So, man, there's a lot to bite up and chew there. You have these stories, and obviously there's an ending that's positive, right? You're doing a lot of great things now. You met your wife. You have 3 kids. But it wasn't just that easy. Like, it wasn't just, you know, hey, I spent all my days just writing love letters and poems all day. Like, there's the actual aspect of being behind bars for that kind of time. So while you're trying to find yourself, and you're also trying to allow Jesus to take over your life, and that to be a big part of you moving forward, temptation's there every single day. Fights are probably still happening every day. I'm assuming. I mean, you were in Medina the whole time.
I went to Grafton.
Are you in Grafton?
Well,
I was
went
just saying,
to
there's other people that have
7
committed worse.
penitentiaries.
Okay, so there's
So
worse crime. There's worse guys that have committed way worse crimes than you. There's violent criminals in there. There's everything else. So while you're trying to go through this process, what is it like on a daily basis inside the yard?
Well, you say, back up, you said that there's guys way worse. I was the toughest dude in the joint, dude. Nobody was doing nothing to me. No.
Guys that have committed worse crimes, I should say.
Right.
I mean, but either way, there's temptation all over the place to bring you right back into that lifestyle.
You got to carry yourself a certain way in the penitentiary. And I was 20 years younger and a lot bigger. And but I knew how to keep to myself. I already had 5.5 years at one joint. And by the way, Noble in mid to late 90s, it was off the hook. I've been through 3 riots.
Wow.
You know, I've seen some things, but you learn how to navigate that to the point where either you want in the trouble or you can stay out of it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, it depends on what you do with the time you got and who you hang around. You have some choices when you get off the prison bus. Am I going to go this way or that way? Am I going to try to be the dude, or am I going to mind my business and maybe get some programming and do the right thing? And if you're trying to do the right thing, guys, even gang members will stay out of your way. If you're walking with God, I've seen guys walking with God that people leave alone. It's how you carry yourself in time. If you're trying to stay in the mix, trying to gamble, try to get, you know, you're always in the middle of it, things can happen.
Sure.
And so I determined going back into the penitentiary. Like my first 5.5 years, I was young, I was a clown. I like to get into it. And then the second time through, I was like, you know what? I got her to consider. It's not just me doing time. I moved from a mindset of that I have no victims, right? Because, you know, I did walk into a store and tell a dude, I'll blow your brains out. But I mean, that's not really a victim and blah, blah, blah. That's how I thought. But then I moved into a mindset that, no, there are a lot of people that I've hurt along the way, and there's a lot of victims. And you know, I'll give you an example. One day, Debbie writes me this letter, and she tells me, you know what, Rich? I forgive you for all the women you've ever slept with, and for all the crimes you ever committed, and all the drugs you've ever done, and all the horrible things you did before we met. I forgive you. And man, I was mad. I wrote her back. I'm like, who do you think you are forgiving me? I didn't do anything to you. Like, I didn't even know you when I was doing that stuff. I don't owe you an apology. Get gone, you know? But then I started to think about it. And it occurred to me, well, wait a minute, I get it now. And this didn't take long for me to figure out, right? I got real wise real quick with her. I said, you know what, you're right. While you were being a good girl and going to Christian schools and saving up your money to buy a house for us and saving your virtue and being a decent person and not smoking or swearing and paying taxes and doing the things you're supposed to do in life, I was committing crimes and being a scumbag, and that's going to play into who you get as a husband, and I'm sorry for that. And it occurred to me there's this ripple effect that the things you do today are going to hurt your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and on into the future. And when I figured that out, I began to carry myself a different way in the penitentiary. Now, I had the respect of a lot of the gangs and a lot of the guys in there because they knew me, they knew my name, they knew I would fight. I wasn't soft. If I had to get into it, so be it. I didn't win every fight, but I won most of them. And guys knew that, you know, okay, there's some guys you can mess with and other guys that are going to stand up for themselves. And as long as you were willing to stand your ground, people would steer around you and leave you alone. But, you know, I didn't have to worry about that anymore because I was, carrying myself in a certain way. I'd go to chapel, I'd read my Bible, and spent most of my days minding my business and writing her letters. Like I was tuning her up for our life together, you know, and that's how I did it. I wrote a lot of letters, but I got a 2-year degree out of Ashland University. Nobody in my family ever graduated college, ever. And then when I got out, I went through Ohio Christian University and got my bachelor's in arts. So I did get a bachelor's degree, which is pretty cool considering I was a straight D student who got kicked out of alternative high school.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
It's extra time to study.
You can change. They say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, and that's a lie from the pit of hell, because we're not dogs, we're people, and we can learn, and we can change if we want to change. So.
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part too. I mean, now you're in there every day, and you're on the other side, right? You're on the side of trying to help other guys, and that's got to be tough. Like, because that first time you went through, you weren't ready to change, and there's probably a lot of first timers that are coming through there that you can see the future, but even your story isn't always enough to get them to see that. So what's that? I don't know. I guess. How are people coming to you in the prison? Tell us about the program that you're actually. You know what? Before we do that, I got to take a piss break.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
All right, let's get back to that. So, getting back to it, graduate. Before we get into what you're doing now, I guess let's talk about it. You graduate from the Christian Academy. You've got a degree now.
Ohio Christian University.
Ohio Christian University. Apologize.
Yeah, no, that's
so. You had I'm assuming there was a plan and why you attended that, or was it just like I need to do something?
No. Let me tell you what happened.
Yeah,
so,
let's
I was working for Prison Fellowship, and our development director for the region, his name was Matt Hunnell. He left his post as the development director and got hired in as a VP down at Ohio Christian University, like a VP at advancement, the vice president of advancement or something. Ohio Christian University is John Maxwell University. It used to be Circleville Bible College, and John Maxwell's father was the one behind all of that. You know who John Maxwell is?
I don't know.
He's like one of the biggest motivational speakers on earth. Like he's part of the Global Leadership Summit. That's John Maxwell. Anyway, so I go down there under Matt Hunnell's invitation to speak. They asked me to be the graduation speaker for the 2021 graduation, I think it was, and the commencement speaker. And so I go down there, and what an honor, because this is the same stage that Tim Tebow spoke on.
Oh, wow.
Mike Huckabee, Ben Carson, and Rich Swigert, of course. You know,
Yeah.
So I go down there, and the president, Dr. Kaluga, says to me, "You got 15 minutes to speak. Nobody will fault you if you take 13, but everyone will hate you if you take 16. So there you go. I'm like, so I'm like, okay, cool, thumbs up. I go down there and I speak on very easily on who you hang around to the graduates, who you're going to hang around, where you're going to hang around, how you're going to spend your time. Simple 3 key points of how to live a successful life after graduation. And I knock it out of the park. And then they give me a tour of the facility, and I'm like, you know what? Could I get my credits from Ashland University carried over here? Oh, sure. I might just go ahead and enroll. Can I do it online? And they're like, yeah. So I did the whole thing from my office at home, and I got a bachelor's degree.
That's awesome.
But it's official. It took me like a little over a year and a half to do the courses, and I got a 4.0. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I got to score that 4.0 and prove that it's proving, the Bible says that God will restore the years the locusts have eaten. What can I say? He also says that delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. When I first heard that when I was a teenager, delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart, I'm like,
right.
All I got to do is delight in the Lord, and I'm going to get crack and hose and all. What I mean?
Right, yeah.
I'm going to do some Lord delighting right now, right? And but what I didn't realize is that it's delight yourself in the Lord, and he gives you the desires of your heart. Well, what's the desires of your heart if you delight in the Lord?
Right.
It's the Lord, and he'll never deny himself from you. It's circular reasoning. Like if you delight in him, he'll give himself to you. Draw nigh unto me, and I will draw nigh unto you. And so that happened when I broke on that floor and I fell back in love with Jesus the right way. It was like, man, I love you, Lord, for what you've done for me. And I want to know more about you. I want to pursue you. I want to put you on and be more like you. And it's been a ride ever since. It's been beautiful. So yeah, I applied for Ohio Christian University. They accepted me. Everything was paid for in a Pell Grant. They tried to give me the loans. Don't they try to give you the loans?
the student loans?
They even sent me a check for like $4,000. I'm like,
All you gotta do is cash
I
it.
took a tack and stuck it to the wall. I'm like, I'm not cashing that. I'm doing the free ride, right? So everything was paid for with a Pell Grant. I never took a loan out or anything. I got a bachelor's. I said to my wife, man, maybe I should go for my master's. And she's like, yeah, if you want to marry someone else, because I'm not doing it. I'm in here taking care of the kids while you're doing that, So
That's pretty funny. So what's the plan with that? Well, I mean, everybody gets a degree, but nobody necessarily has. Not everybody has a plan. So did you know what you were going to do with it, or is that?
Well.
Or were you just hoping that was going to help you find a job? Because obviously, being a convicted felon, we talked about that earlier.
Well, and that's what it really boils down to. There's so many politically correct ways of handling it: inmate, convict, prisoner, offender, restored citizen, returning citizen. Look, for the guy who gets out of the joint and wants to get his life back on track, get a degree. I don't care what it's in. It can be a degree in opening boxes. If you got a degree, you got a degree. And people are more apt to look at you and offer you more. And recidivism drops if you have a degree. I mean, that's just common sense. If you have something to offer to society, they're willing to pay you more, then you're less apt to panic and run out and try to do things for money. It's the Trading Places effect with Eddie Murphy. Remember that movie where they're like, I bet for $1 if you give this guy everything, he'll screw it up. Well, he didn't, because sometimes when you give somebody everything, they do the right thing with it. And that's what basically happened to me. I was given the keys to the kingdom, and I went the right direction and did the right thing with that.
Yeah, and when it comes to college, I mean, I'm not a big fan of college. I didn't go, but hiring in a corporate environment and things like that, you can see where, even for you coming out of prison, like, at least I know this guy can set his mind to something and accomplish it.
Right.
So, I mean, regardless of what you got your degree in, like, no, this guy set a schedule. He went to class, he did his job, and he graduated with a 4.0. So he's got to be worth something. He's got to be a decent human in the sense that he's able to do that. So, I mean, I would see how that would open more opportunities. Then he bounced between 3-month jobs, between construction, roofing, depending on the time of year, concrete, et cetera, and like never really has anything. So that degree helps you kind of at least stand aside from the rest of the people that they're seeing. Now what? What do you want to do with it?
Well, I'm using it to go back into the prison system at many different levels and teach, facilitate, which I never ever saw myself as a teacher. I threw desks at teachers, right? So I never saw myself as being an instructor, but it comes naturally because I'm not. Prisoners can smell insincerity. They can perceive it. Like if you're insincere, they'll get you. Like, man, get out of here with all that stuff. We don't believe you. But when you're sincere, it's easy to do because I'm telling the truth. I'm telling from experience. I'll give you an example. I'm going to end up writing a book. I've already been writing for quite some time, but I'm going to write some sort of book on radical reentry. Okay. One of the things I teach men in the prison system is I can tell you if you're successful by your phone number. And they're like, what are you talking about, Rich? I've had the same phone number since I got out of prison in 2011. If you've had like phone number after phone number after phone number after phone number, it's because you aren't stable and you keep screwing up your jobs. You keep not paying your phone plan. You got to go somewhere else and get another one. If you've had address after address after address, that's why the ORAS looks at how long you've lived at that address. How long were you married at the time of the crime? How old you were at the time of the crime? What your education level was at the time of the crime? Were you employed? All those things play into whether or not you're more likely to offend again. And your phone number plays in there too. Like guys that will have a number and then all of a sudden I go to call them, this number's disconnected, man. It's probably a good sign that guy is not being responsible.
Right.
And there's just little things that guys need to understand, that to get out of prison and stay out of prison really takes changing your mindset from being a victim to being a victor. I'm the guy that used to stand... I'm the guy that used to trade my food stamps in 75 cents on $1 so I could go get high. Yeah. Right? That's not what food stamps are for, right? Right? I didn't, I'm the guy that used to knock at the church door and play the poor guy so that I've stood on corners with "will work for food" signs. I've done that, dude. And so I've been a master of the con game to the point where now I can speak into the hearts of the con artist and tell them, don't paint yourself in a corner, man. You keep crying wolf so long. It's that same story that we heard as kids. I hear guys talk about, how do I put this? In a good example is this. In 1988, I went to Old Colony Penitentiary in Massachusetts. It's called Bridgewater. It's one of the nastiest, oldest. I mean, you ever see the show, The Castle? It's got the gargoyles. Yeah. This is the type of Civil War granite block penitentiaries with the old cages. And I go there for treatment in lieu of conviction, because this is like every time you go in front of the judge, you say, it wasn't me, it was the drugs. And the judge is like, treatment in lieu of conviction. And you play the system. So I go in there, and while I'm there, when you go there, you first go through like 2 weeks of detox, whether you want to or not. They dress you out in a white jumpsuit. You go in this Florence Nightingale style, old, like if you know anything about her, it's like one of those old medical wards with the single bunks down both sides with the pillars, and it's white sheets and bunks all the way down, and people are sitting there sweating and rocking and delirium tremors and coming off junk. And they had a window back in 1988 where you could walk up any time of the day and be like, I have a headache, and they would give you a pill. Or my back hurts, and they would give you a pill. Or I can't sleep, and they would give you a pill. Or I hear voices, and they would give you a pill. And it was like click, click, boom. Amitriptyline, Darvon, Darvocet, Percodan, Percocet, all the different pills are coming through the window. Yeah. And guys were coming in there getting 3 hots in a cot and dope. What better life, right? So they're getting stuck in this system, right? And I came in and I started playing the game, like sitting around playing spades, go up to the window, get a little pill, get my meal, hang out, be high, After a couple of days of that, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm going to get trapped here if I don't knock it off. And my cousins were going through. This was like a family affair, right? We're all doing it. This is the vacation for the cousins. Like we all go there to do a couple weeks. We're
going to Bridgewater.
Yeah. Some people go to Florida. Some go to Hawaii. We go to Bridgewater. And so,
man,
years and years later, my cousin is still trapped, still to this day, to the point where he lied and said, I hear voices, so they would give him pills so that when he got out of jail, he'd be like, I hear voices. He wasn't telling the truth. He was lying because I knew him. He was just pretending so that he would get that Social Security check.
Jesus, yeah.
So watch this. You keep lying until you become it. And you paint yourself in a corner to where you can't work anymore. And you've lied to yourself so much that you actually become dependent upon the pills and upon the check, and you hear voices.
Right.
You've lied so long, you start to hear them. Guys in the penitentiary do that to themselves. They lie to themselves so often and so much that they become entitled. They become lax in their thinking. They become victims. They have medical victim stance for it. You know what medical victim stance is?
No.
It's when you pretend you can't do something so that you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? Or
makes sense.
You do dishes horribly so they never ask you to do dishes again. Like, he's not the one to ask to do dishes. He stinks at it when he really just pretended, right?
Yeah, it doesn't work for me. My wife tells me I still have to do the dishes, but only now she has to tell me I'm not doing a good job at it and watch me do it, which is 10 times worse.
But I've been equipped, and I don't know why. I raised my hand and said, I'm willing, send me. And I'm the guy that goes into the penitentiary, and I'm the guy that when guys come into my class for the first day, I tell them, listen, man, and you're not going to hear this from too many people, are going to have the guts to stand in front of a room full of convicts. You signed up for this thing. Now don't be a wimp or a sissy. Finish this thing. You put your name on the contract. You signed the participation agreement. Now do it. Don't be a coward.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, you can't talk to me like that. Yes, I can. You signed the participation agreement. Now shut up. Now, now do your job. But they respect that. They respect that kind of leadership to be able to say, I know the way out of here. If you want to get out, follow me and quit crying. And I'll show you the way. And I'll love you on the way. When you do well, I'll reward you. When you're acting up, I'll hold you accountable. Let's go.
Well, the other thing too, and you talked about it, like, you killed that speech right at the university, and I think what comes through is your passion and your experience. So when people struggle at talking about something, or you see somebody that doesn't do well at public speaking or something like that, I've always believed like, well, either they're not passionate about what they have to talk about, or they just don't know enough to actually talk about it and sound informed. So then what happens? You get nervous, you start speaking funny, then people don't respect what you're saying. I mean, just like a Joe Biden, right?
Where? Who? Yeah,
the same thing with Kamala
the
Harris.
best part of waking up is Donald Trump is president.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, the Mexicans don't seem too happy about that right now. I understand ICE has got one place they got to go right now, and they can evict probably 20% of them from the U.S.
Pinchy.
I saw something today. What is it, Atlanta? That they're rioting today?
Yep.
Yeah, good for them. At least we all know.
Do it the right way. That's all I got to say. Just follow the rules, do it the right way.
Well, and but when you're talking to people that don't follow rules, when you talk to people that do what they want, when you talk to people that they don't think about consequences. Maybe they do when they get caught, but I mean, you weren't thinking about the consequences when you were breaking into a house. You were thinking about, I hope I get enough money to score enough dope so I don't got to do this for 2 weeks.
Right.
So when those are the people that are coming to you and they're like, yeah, you signed a contract, they're thinking to themselves like, who's this fucking guy? I've signed all kinds of shit. I said I wouldn't do it again. I said I would go on probation. I said I would do whatever the judge throws in their face in order to reduce their sentence. And now they're sitting there with the guy who's like, no, you're going to fucking do it, or I'm just going to either boot you out, or you're going to learn the hard way that this is the better way. And I think that comes across when you talk. The other thing is too, when a lot of people play or not play, but when they use the been there, done that, and now I'm here, you can be here too card, the way they talk changes, the slang they use changes, the words they sing changes. Like, you can tell that you spent the time in there. Like, you're not like a guy who did 1 year in there is like, I was here and I got out and I turned it around.
Right.
Like,
Look
no,
at me.
I got like 20 years of fucking up. Like, I'm going to share some experiences with you, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to try to get out of that. So how does this, let's talk about the contract that these guys sent, because this is the program you run now, right? And what, I'm sorry, what is it again? The name of the actual program?
It's Prison Fellowship Academy.
And that's something that's a nationwide program, correct?
Correct.
So this is something that's in every prison? Or is it select few?
It's in a few. I don't remember the exact number, but there were two different tiers. There was the tier 1, which was a 2 to 3 night a week, 200 curriculum hour, and then there was the much more curriculum, 500 curriculum hour. Tier 2 academy, which is a 12 to 14 month. The difference is with the tier 2, and there is no tier 2, tier 1 anymore, because they've changed tier 1 to be called a GROW program, and it's more Christian based. Now they just call it academy. But with the academy, you're looking at having an employee on site under a contract with the department, carrying keys, carrying a cell phone, access to computer, things like that. And the curriculum is so entrenched, like you've heard some of it. It's so, we deal with things like you can't get away with everything. How's that for a topic?
Yeah.
You can't get away with everything. Overcoming entitlement.
There's a lot of people that need that lesson.
Well, and it's dealing with anger and stress and trauma, childhood trauma. It's taking a look at relating to who you are, restoring who you are, rethinking who you are, and beginning with understanding, how do you think? What is a thought? You know what I mean? Guys never even thought, what is a thought? Metacognition, okay?
Yeah.
Getting into why you think the way you think and your experiences. We all have like a worldview tree. Your roots go down into the environment. You're a product of what you've drawn through those roots. It's gone up into the value system of your tree trunk and spread through the actions of your branches into the world. What have you brought into the world from your experiences? Some of us come from the hood, right? Some of us come from some pretty horrible places, and we draw up and we become the experience that we're drawing from. But the difference is that, unlike trees, we can move. We can get a new environment and new people around us and new experiences. And so we get you to think about, why do I think like that? What makes me tick? When I'm at the microwave first thing in the morning, is that the best time for me to be there if I'm prone to punching people in the face? No, maybe I need to think about somewhere else to be in there, So we get them to start thinking about what makes them tick, what makes them act up, and then taking them through thinking about the consequences. We have this whole process called play the tape back. Where play the tape out to the end.
Yeah.
They use and let me give you this real quick. This guy has an example. He shows up at a wedding, and he can smell the wine. He's fresh out the joint. He smells the wine. He's like, ooh, that smells good. I'd like to have a glass of wine. Calls his sponsor like he's sweating, like, man, I think I'm going to drink if I don't talk to you. And he's like, listen, let's play that out. Like, okay, you really don't want the wine. What was your real drug of choice? He's like, meth. Okay, so, drink the wine. Now you're going to the meth house, right? But now what's happening? Oh, I'm going back to the joint, right? You're going to the joint. So what was your worst meal in the joint? Oh, turkey tetrazzini. Nobody knows what's in turkey tetrazzini, right? So he's like, okay, so you just got back to the joint for violating your parole and you're going back. So you get there, you drop your locker box and you pack up at the bunk. You're hungry, so you hit the chow hall. They're having turkey tetrazzini, right? Right. So wash it down with that glass of wine. You know what I mean? Because that's where that's leading you. So think about it, right? That's a good way of kind of formulating the thought to say, stop, objectify the situation, get out of it for a minute and think about how it's going to cost you, your family, and everybody else. And let's get honest about it. We do small group discussions, breakout groups. We do a full Celebrate Recovery. We do the Alpha program. We do fathering programs, a financial course, all within a 12 to 14-month period of equipping men to become change agents so they can go back into society and have a better shot at never coming back. Here's another thing I want you to think about. And you guys have probably never heard anything quite like this, but this will blow your minds. If you go to a church, let's say Heartland, and I ask a group of men that have never done a day of time in their life, I give them an example. I say, okay, think about this. Let's say you own a house in a nice neighborhood. You're over on Oak Brook Drive, or, Sunhaven or something, right? You're over on Twin Oaks or whatever, right? And you got a nice little Ryan home. There's a white picket fence, and there's beautiful grass. You got a little dog, couple kids playing in the yard. You're going to work every day. Bye, honey. And she's like, see you later, dear. And it's perfect, right? Americanville, right? You get the American dream, right? But then somebody moves in next door. And you start seeing traffic coming and going in the middle of the night, seedy characters, you hear yelling and screaming, beer bottles and trash cans, beeping horns. It's turning into the ghetto. Then all of a sudden you notice, you find out that the guy is in his garage cooking meth in quantity in the garage. And you know that if it blows up, your children's bedroom is adjacent to that garage to where if it blows up, it will kill your kids. What are you going to do about it?
I'm calling the cops.
Right? If you ask most people in church, what would you do about it? Most men would say,
I'm calling the cops.
Right. But if you ask a convict what they would do, they would say,
oh God, I could think of a million things. I'm gonna go
knock on the door.
I'm gonna ask him to stop, or I might just swing by for a hit.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a great thing to get these guys to think. So we play this thing out, and I'll say, okay, so you're gonna go over there. I'm the guy cooking meth. Come on over and knock at my door. Knock at my door.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you want?
Can you stop?
Mind your business, punk. Bam. Shut the door, right? Now what are you going to do? Now you're feeling like, ooh.
Yeah, now my manhood's challenged.
I got to take it to another level, right? So I'm going to get the bat or the gun or whatever. I'm going to take this dude out, right? So let's say you do that, right? You come over and let's just say you win. What does that look like? Now I'm dead on the floor or I'm unconscious bleeding. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm running.
But where are you going?
Not home.
But where are you going?
Oh, the joint.
So you're going to the joint for what you did to me, right? Why did you do it to me?
Because I was trying to protect my kids.
But now who's protecting your kids? Because you're in the joint.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're talking about something. Because Sport Coat got your girl, right? Jody's at your house now because you're in the joint, right?
Fucking Jody. Jody follows you through the military, follows you through fucking
So
jail.
you're in the joint and somebody else is taking care of your kids. Is that what you did? Because that don't make sense to me. This whole code that we live by, it's snitching if you call the cops. Why? I don't know you. And I pay their taxes. I mean, they're on my dime to serve their civil service, right? First of all, there's that to consider. And then snitching is usually like if we're in a gang together and I'm telling on the gang, that's snitching, right? But I mean, I don't owe any allegiance to this person that's cooking meth and might kill my children.
Right.
So, you have to put things in context. And what happened was a lot of us grew up in the ghetto. We grew up in the hood. And I grew up in the real hood. The hood where you could touch two apartment buildings and there's 6-story highs full of sins and goy and Spaniards and and everybody speaking different languages and yelling and screaming and gunshots, and then you got hypodermic needles and used condoms and trash in the alley and people peeing and falling down drunk. This is the ghetto, not Mount Vernon, and I feel like I'm oppressed, right? so you're coming through this situation thinking, well, the way I grew up, my mother said that we never talk to the cops. We don't tell anyone our business. What goes on at home stays at home. You don't talk to case managers in school. And you were shamed if you talked to the police or anything like that. And so we grew up like it was a dichotomy. The cops were the bad guys and we need to mind our business. But that poured over to all authority. Think about this. I don't talk to the cops. I don't talk to a case manager at school. I don't tell anybody my business. I don't talk to the postman because he's got an eagle on his sleeve. He looks like a cop. I don't talk to the fireman because he's an official. He looks like a cop. I don't trust authorities so that when I go get a job and my boss says, hey, do this, I'm like, you're his authority figure. I'm doing what I want. And it becomes this whole mindset. And that's the mindset that'll keep you trapped in prison for the rest of your life. I'll ask convicts, hey, are all cops bad? And then I brace myself because I'm waiting for the joker in the class to be like, yeah, they're all bad. And I'm like, nonsense. Right. That's not true. You have to look at the individual behind the badge. There's some decent people that just want to provide for their family. They're not in here to harass you. Yes, there are some bad ones that just come in here and they're toxic and they enjoy the power trip and but that's not everybody. And I want to flip that switch to get you to change the way you conventionally think. I want to challenge that. It's called not only a catalyst, but it's like a paradigm shift. That shift in the thinking. Guy gets on a train. He's tired. It's the end of the workday. He just got fired. He's on his way home to tell his wife. He's had it. He's at the verge of drinking. Things just haven't been going well. And he's got this steaming headache, this beaming headache, and he just wants to be quiet on the ride home and figure out how he's going to tell his wife he got fired. So he's sitting alone on the subway, and he's like, well, at least it's quiet. And then the doors open. And this guy piles on with his 3 kids, and they're yelling and screaming and running around and causing chaos and hitting each other. And he's like, oh, no. And it's still 20 minutes before he gets home, and he's like, oh. And 15 minutes into the ride, he's just ready to scream. And he finally looks over at the guy who seems to be ignoring his 3 kids, and he's like, hey, mister, can you just calm your kids down? And the guy looks up with a faraway look and says, oh, I didn't realize they were loud. We just came from the hospital where we learned that their mother died, and I don't know how to tell them. It's a paradigm shift.
Sure.
Because now the guy's like, well, 3 screaming kids doesn't bother me anymore because now I sympathize with them. It's the same thing we want to do to inmates to say, no, not all cops are bad. No, the guy dealing drugs out of the next door is not snitching on him. The way you've been thinking your whole life is backwards. And if you can think forward, if you can fail forward, your life will change.
How, that's powerful, right? We all have different opinions on Christ and the way that follows, but it's hard to disagree with how powerful that could be on someone who's been on that other side of the coin and doesn't have something to follow, to chase, to help them inspire to live by. So you run this program. It's 12 to 14 months for the big program. Do you guys keep track of like success rates? Do you keep track of, comebacks, things like that? Is that something that you guys...
No.
You don't. No, you don't.
Yes. Well, it's in the works. I mean, we've only been operating out of Grafton Correctional with Tier 2 Academy for 2 graduated classes. We're in our 3rd cohort.
So that's what, two and a half years roughly?
It's still early enough that we don't have enough samples to really...
Gotcha.
And there's been some success and there's been some failure. And you can really see it in front of you. When the guy's constantly late, when he's complaining about homework, when he's rolling his eyes, you're like, chances that guy's going to, succeed, pretty slim. But the guy who's always showing up and putting in the work, that's the one you're like, this guy's going to make it. And even then, you can still get let down. But our job, statistically, yes, they're going to have a decrease in the likelihood of failing if they can make it through this program. But I worry less about success or failure and worry more about planting the seeds. Let me tell you why. Down at Noble, when I did my first bit, they had a program back in the 90s called Therapeutic Community. And that was a very intense living in a dorm with other men, constantly under pressure, inspections. They had a whole team of inmates that were like equipped as police officers called expediters that would go around holding you accountable. And guys were like, "You're snitching," and it was a madhouse. And I went through that program for 10 months. It was a 12-month program, and on the 10th month, I got kicked out because I couldn't act as if. They would have these little things where they would like throw paper on the ground, and they would be like, "Swagger, pick up that paper. I saw you drop it." And back in my 20s, I didn't get act as if. I was more of a just person in my mind. I'm like, if it's not right, I'm not doing it, right? And I knew what justice was. And so somebody would be like, "Pick up that paper. I saw you drop." Like, I didn't drop that. Pull up. We saw you drop. No, I didn't. Yes, you did. Pull up. And I'm like, man, pull up these, you know what's. I'm not pulling that up, And so it was like I didn't understand that when you join a program where if they hold you accountable, the only response you're supposed to give to an expediter when they say pick that up is, "Thank you for saving my life." And I didn't understand that
Right.
we were like that you have to answer to authority. Everybody answers to authority. Well, "Thank you for saving my life" should have been the response. So they kicked me out in 10 months, right? And 4 months after I get kicked out, they graduated 2 months later. And then 2 months after that, they started the next round and they let me back in to try again. And 10 months later, I got kicked out again. So I did 20 months of a 12-month program and got kicked out twice. But
And
guess,
didn't get anything out of it.
I got a lot out of it. It changed my life because I pulled, even though I failed the program, it planted seeds in my heart that I knew I was able to rationalize some of the truths that I learned going through that program. And it even impacted me today. I speak on behalf of the therapeutic community. They pull me in their program, tell the guys, and I'll be like, "Yeah, you can fail and still win, Rocky, you can get beat up and still be a champion, right?
Right.
So it's how you internalize what you've done with your time. You mentioned a minute ago, you said, it was so funny because I was thinking about it at the same time. You mentioned a coin. You said coin, right? I want to tell you something. When I got out of prison in 2011, my wife had bought me a beautiful truck. I had probably we're going to argue because I like Ford, but whatever. So I had a Ford F-150, but it was given to me. You got to like freebies, right? So I had this Ford F-150 black STX extended cab. I'm driving around in it, feeling free. And I like to pick the trash sometimes. I mean, Dinah got some nice trash.
Yeah,
right?
we had a whole conversation about picking the trash.
So I'm driving through one of the neighborhoods and I look over and there's this beautiful golf bag sitting there. And I'm like, that looks nice. So I jump out and I go over and I forget, you guys golf?
Yeah.
So there's this like Osio or Osgio or something, a name brand
Odyssey.
golf. Well, this one had a kickstand and everything. It was nice.
Oh, yeah.
So I looked it up on eBay and it's like $175 new. And this one looks mint. And I'm like, well, that's nice. So I put it in a yard sale that my wife and I were having. And this guy comes up and taps me on the shoulder. He's like, "What do you want for that bag?" I'm like, and I'm looking at him like, that guy looks familiar. I don't know where I know that guy from. I said, "I'll tell you what, I know it's worth about $175. You give me $15 and we'll call it square." So he reaches in his pockets and he pulls out a 1928 silver peace dollar and a $10 bill. And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'll take the peace dollar because, I'm a hustler, right?" And he's like, nah. And I'm like, now here comes the real hustle. I'm like, well, I'll give you the bag and I'll give you $10. You give me the peace dollar, right? Because I know it's worth about $30, right? And he's like, nah, my mother gave me that. And I'm thinking, well, why did you show it to me then, man? All right, I'll tell you what. I'll take the $10. Here's the bag. If you come back with the $5, great. If not, God bless. Have a good life, right? A couple hours later, we're packing in the yard sale, and this guy comes up and taps me on the shoulder again. And I turn around. He's holding out a 1923 beautifully conditioned silver peace dollar. And I'm like, really? You're giving me that? He's like, sure. I'm like, do you want the $10 back? He's like, no. I'm like, yes, score, man. I got $10 and a silver peace dollar for a piece of trash. And I'm like, man, that's great. My name is Rich Swagger. What's your name? He said, Christopher Collier. Oh, is that? Oh, wow. Judge Collier. You gave me 9 years in prison, man. He's the guy that sentenced me, right? I'm like, that's awesome, right? He's like, he took a step back. I'm like, no, it's cool. I'm not mad. You saved my life. There was an old story that used to go around the penitentiary back in the day when I was doing time, that when your sentencing judge let you go, and they said this was still on the books in Ohio. I doubt it. It's all myth, convict mess. But they said when the judge lets you go, he's got to give you a horse to get to the next town and a silver dollar for lodgings. This guy hands me the silver dollar, unknowingly knowing that he's my sentencing judge, giving me a silver dollar. On one side, it says liberty. Liberty.
Yeah.
Now, man, you can call that coincidence.
That's pretty cool.
You can think of that however you want, but I know deep down inside that was God sending me a message that my time is over. My judge completed my sentence is complete, and I've been handed my liberty. So there's just these things that have happened to me. Going through the penitentiary, I prayed and said some miracles happened, things that are unexplainable. You can call them coincidences, and I just look at it and I say, okay, I believe there's a God. I know there's a God.
Amen.
Yeah, that's something. That's
What
pretty
about
cool.
the horse, though?
Yeah.
He owes me. He owes me. Yeah, I'm waiting. Yeah.
Well, we invited him here today. Let's invite. Oh, wait.
Right.
So this
Judge Collier sits down. That'd be crazy.
that'd be pretty hilarious, right?
That never happened.
He's
Yes,
actually my
it did.
neighbor. I texted him a few minutes ago.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
came over.
I still have that coin, man.
I mean, how could you not?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
still have
obviously
it.
got some. You didn't get the $30 for it.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, we talked about trash picking the other day. Actually, what was that? 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
My
I've
wife,
made thousands.
my wife and I. She corrected me after the show. I thought it was like 17, 18. It was the first year we did it. We made like 13 to 14,000.
Trash picking.
Trash picking
In
the
Medina.
summer. Yeah, in
Because
Medina.
there's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah,
We'll
people
take-
are just crazy. They
they're
throw stuff.
nuts.
I'm like,
Brand
what? They don't take the 5 minutes to put it on Facebook Marketplace for $50. You
That's
were
it.
talking about a garage sale.
Yeah.
Like, I'm watching people throw out complete like kitchen or patio sets.
Yeah, big time.
Sometimes $100.
Yep.
And gone in 24 hours.
Dude,
Like,
I've picked jewelry out of the trash,
I'm
gold
sure.
and silver. People throw away jewelry boxes. I'll open up like they didn't take the jewelry out.
Yeah.
Great, that's great. You know what I mean?
yeah. And I was like, this is a great, like, talk about trying to get on your feet when you get out of prison.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're looking for a summer job. I got
Right.
one for you. Just
So what I do, because I have a pickup truck, is I'll go and I got a different one now because it's a different Ford. But when I go, if somebody throws away a piece of furniture,
Yeah.
most people throw away furniture because a knob falls off,
Yeah.
or a hinge screw comes out. You take it home, you fix the screw, you put the hinge back on, and you sell it on Facebook.
Well, yeah, you see people all the time, and heavy as shit, right? Because they throw out the old solid wood stuff,
Right.
and you pick it up, and it's got like all the nice, cool designs on it, and the stuff's like brand. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just been in their house for 20 years, and it's funny because there'd be times it'd be 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. Like, we'd be backing my truck up halfway up their drive, and my wife, she's like, what, 5'5", 115 pounds. She's not picking up a 150, 200-pound dresser. And I'm like trying to maneuver this into and I was like, I just wonder if people are outside of their front yard just watching. Man, look at this dude. Let's see if you can get that one up there. Oh, almost fell on him. Oh, that would have been good. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. And it's funny you bring it up because not enough people do that. That's something my dad taught me. He's like, people throw out all kinds of stuff. There's always a use for it. I remember the first time I went with him, actually, we used to go for, he took me with him the first time. He was always finding bed rails. People always throw out bed rails, right? They're nothing. And we would weld them, build carts with them and stuff. But the first time I went, box of LPs. I mean, like, I still have the Michael
vinyls.
Jackson Thriller
Yeah,
album,
man, you just-
Nirvana, the
yeah.
Cars, like just a whole box of them somebody put out. This is out in Hankley. And this was, 30 years ago. So, LPs were still dope. Like, I didn't even have an LP player, but I wanted it then, and my completion of graduation when I was like probably 14, so it's probably like 2 years after that. We used to walk you from Medina, so Lafayette, where the firehouse.
I've been around Medina for about 30 years.
Okay, so like Lafayette baseball fields. We used to live up, where Richardson's Farms is at?
Yeah.
Yeah, we lived across the street from there.
Okay.
So one day walking back from baseball practice at the fields, there is like, it's like a 50 or 60 inch TV. It might have only been 40, I don't know, but it was one of those ones that was like
The box.
the huge, probably was 50 inch. It was one of those ones, the projection ones.
Right.
On wheels. I pushed that thing all the way from Lafayette Market. It was like 2 houses away from Lafayette Market to Richardson's Farms, get into the driveway. My dad's like, what the hell?
Did it
I was
work?
like, somebody threw it out. I get it all the way downstairs to the basement. It works. I'm like, unbelievable. It works, right? 2 hours later, it shits the bed, doesn't ever turn back on again. My dad's like, good luck getting that upstairs. I'm like, fuck. That thing sat in my
Like a
room,
big
I think, until
cabinet.
I was like a junior in high school because I was like, I don't know what else to do with it at this point.
Turn it into an aquarium or something.
Firewood.
So these guys that are going through the program now, I mean, is there like a limit to who can be in it? Can anybody be in it? Do they have to apply for it? I mean, because obviously you're talking about some different permissions and things like that are available to them, I'm assuming.
Right.
So
well,
what's that process look like?
It's interesting because it's 12 to 14 months of strong character development. They have to agree to receive content from a Christian worldview, which is they sign a participation agreement, right? Which it does give me some liberties to talk about certain things. Like if they bring up marriage and things, I can stand on traditional Christian marriage without getting fruit thrown at me because, they signed up for it. But I have to be conscious of it too and try not to be careful with hot button topics and stuff like that because we live in a day and age and you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But most of the men coming into that, they, obviously there's different reasons for wanting to go through that program. A lot of those guys, some of them are doing life in prison, never, quite potentially never going home, but they want to get that degree into their jacket. So when they go to the parole board, they have that to show that, hey, look, I can do a hard program and be dependable. I write a letter of graduation for every man that goes through it and say, each one of these guys that go to the parole board, they deserve a second glance. I won't trust every single one of them can go out and be the perfect person, but I will put that letter in their file that says they did the job and should have that merit for that award for what they did. The degree looks nice. The interesting thing is that we recruit in-house right at Grafton, but if I can't get enough guys, I'll start recruiting from other prisons. And who would have
join
ever
the program?
And who would have ever thunk that a guy who did time in the system would have any say or power to be able to move a prisoner from one prison to another?
Yeah, no kidding.
But, I mean, there's a process. Obviously, the security doesn't fall to me. They have to have a unit manager background to see how their RIB tickets are and what they've been doing on the compound. If they've been gang banging or drugging or getting caught doing things they aren't supposed to do, then obviously they got to be 1 year free and clean of incident to be considered. And then they have to go through the interview process. We do a process online through Teams meetings. I'll meet with them. I'll ask them why they want to be a part of the program. And then I'll I came up with this formula. You're going to love this. I came up with this formula called WAH, W-A-H, right? It's a formula that I tell them when I'm interviewing them. I'll be like, one of the greatest viruses going around the penitentiary right now. It's not COVID-19. It's not AIDS. Although those have people that are, there's a lot of victims from those diseases. But the biggest disease going through the penitentiary is this disease of WAH. And they're like, what's that? It's where I say, hey man, you're late to class, and you're like, well, what about him? Hey man, you need to do your homework. Well, what about him? He didn't do his homework. That's that entitlement, dude. Right? And I'm like, real men don't, try to shift the blame and say, well, what about that guy? They say, you know what? You're right. I didn't do my homework. Right? I was late to class. I needed to take the L for that. And I hold them accountable. The biggest hurdle to overcome in my position with running one of these programs is keeping the men interested and focused and holding them accountable to showing up, because a lot of them will try to play games. I'll tell the guys going through the interview, hey, you know what? Guy who joins the Marine Corps, and I never had the pleasure of going through the Marine Corps. I wish I had. Instead, I went through a different type of Marine Corps. I went through the penitentiary. And there's a lot of similarities in the militancy, the militant aspect of getting trained to be an inmate in the system, like you go through getting your head shaved and yelled at and all that stuff, right? So when you join the Marine Corps, and I've been around some Marines. I had a cellie who was a Marine he was a forward observer in the Marine Corps. He put me through 5 years of Marine Corps training. Upside down, hanging upside down, sit-ups, getting kicked in the guts, 8-count bodybuilders, wind sprints, all that stuff. And when you join the Corps, and the drill instructor gets you off the bus and says, all right, Pew, get down. You're like, it's not fair, he's yelling at me. No, you joined the Marine Corps, dude. You signed up to get yelled at. Oh, yeah. And it's the same thing coming into the program. Oh, you can't tell me to show up to class. Yes, I can. You signed up. Now do the job. Stop hitting me with that wah factor. Like, what about him? What about her? Do the job.
Yeah, that's something those guys aren't used to, those accountability. For lots of reasons. They could be similar to you where they didn't have a father in the household. They could be, they went to school system that just shit on them the first time they screwed up and then just kicked them to the side.
Yeah.
You know, I won't argue there's reasons that people make mistakes. Unfortunately, even as a society, we don't necessarily hold anybody to accountable to those mistakes. And what happens is you get away with it until you don't. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, now you're in these scenarios where you're thinking that you could still use the same things to get away from it. But bro, you're behind bars. You're in a, you know, maybe a 1 acre facility. You're not going anywhere. Like that to me is like the time that I did get locked up. Like that scared me more than anything. Was the fact that I could wake up tomorrow in the same exact place and not be able to just do as I please. Is that like a moment for, you know, you've obviously there's a couple of times you've gone in, but do you see that even now on this end where they want to do that program, they join the program? How hard is it for them to realize that they're going to be there? Like they're not leaving. Like what's that mental
You mean for the program or prison?
For prison in general. Yeah, for these guys that are coming in there that are entering the program, but they're
Well, a lot of the guys that are coming into the program aren't coming fresh from jail.
okay.
All right.
I do have one that went through Medina that I thought was a good. I was actually I volunteer at Medina County Jail too, and I teach classes over there too. And I teach classes at Stark Community-Based Correctional Facility, and I teach classes at GRC.
Wow.
I'm in a lot of different facilities. I teach an authentic manhood class, the 33 series. I don't know if you know about that.
I don't.
I mean, you're talking like guys' night.
Yeah.
Check out some authentic manhood. Now,
All right.
that's some good stuff. But most of the guys are already conditioned in the penitentiary, and you know, time is relative. It really is, because I've watched guys get a 30-day sentence in the courtroom, and they're like, no, and their whole life is over. And I've got 9 years given to me, and I'm like, bet, dancing out the courtroom, like, woo, I've dodged a bullet, right? So time is relative. It really is. One day I sat down and I took the 18 years that I did, and I added like 15 minutes a day needing to use the toilet times 18 years per day. And it came out to like 3 months on the toilet, right? And I'm like, these dudes are doing 30 days in the county jail and they're crying. I got that on the toilet, dude. You know what I mean? So time is really relative. Most people surrender after a while and they go, it's just my reality. I'm going to deal with it. And it's not as horrible as you think. Prison actually isn't what it used to be. And there's good and there's bad to some of the changes. Obviously, there's positives and negatives that you can draw from those realities. They got, like right now going through the prison system, like I've been through prisons speaking or visiting prisons with Prison Fellowship from the state of Maine all the way to Texas and Florida.
Okay.
All up and down. And some of the roughest places I've been are like Oklahoma prisons. Those are rough. Like those guys are bitten out there. And I've been in 8-man cells, 12-man cells.
Wow.
In Texas and Florida, they give you Buck Rogers time. Like you doing 10 years for a robbery here, you're doing 40 in Florida. And it's like, you know, the reality of those things are, you know, time is a really harsh thing for some of those people. So I actually, one of the things that will change in your perspective, always be open to change. Always be open to intellectual humility and to being able to change your opinion about things. I used to be a very staunch death penalty guy. Even as an inmate, I thought, you know, especially looking around at some of the creeps that I was around, because there's some creeps in there, man. And I was looking
that you
around,
were not like,
you know, the ones that are 58 years old and they're getting Highlight magazine delivered to their cells. Okay, so I've been around some things, right? And I'm looking at some of these guys and I'm going, yep, the death penalty is a good thing, right? But then when you go down to Texas and you stand on death row and you have 186 men waiting death, singing Amazing Grace through their cell at you, it'll change you. That'll change your perspective. And I'm just glad that I'm not the one who makes the decision to throw the switch. Right. I used to say, well, God enacted the death penalty in the Garden of Eden when he said to Adam and Eve, if you do this, you'll die, right? So he's all about the death penalty. But that's kind of justifying my position and looking at God the way I kind of want to. But if you look at Christ and the way he lived, and how God looks at how life is precious, he stitched us together in our mother's womb, knew us before we were born, breathed life into each and every one of us. I'm glad that I don't have to make that decision, and that is a power beyond me. I allow God to be God, and I'll just do my job of trying to spread love and spread the message of hope, and hope it affects as many people as possible. And we all take time, and we all take punishment specific when we're victimized too. Like we feel different when it's a kid we know, or when it's a person who gets murdered that we know.
Sure.
We want different results. But I always remain open to the fact that I'm a human being. I could be wrong. I could be dead wrong. Going on the floor as a Democrat, rising up a Republican, figuring out some different things. I am open that, in 10 years from now, I may look at things a little bit differently. But I always surrender my will to say, I want to follow you. What you did mattered, and I'm just playing a little bitty part of that. Show me the way you want me to go. I'm your tool. Use me for what you want to use me for. Am I perfect? No. Do I still fail? Absolutely. I'm a scumbag, dude. Without him, I'm a knob, dude. I need him,
So how, obviously this stuff costs money. Do you guys get funding from the state? Do the prisons fund these programs? Do you guys get donations? How does the things that you guys do come about financially?
You have a list of questions. You just pop these up. You just figure these out.
I just hear
That's what makes him
something.
a good guy, right? So you're running a podcast, right?
I just as I'm sitting here thinking about all the stuff that you're doing, you're talking about going to different states and stuff like that. And obviously there's a curriculum that you guys have put together. I'm assuming there's some funding for all this at some point.
Donor dollars and
all donor dollars.
It's all donor dollars. It's
Wow.
all nonprofit, and we don't charge the state anything, which means that the state is very attracted to us. I remember I went down to Marysville. They're very attracted.
Yeah,
to us.
they are.
I went down to Marysville some years ago, and that's the oldest operating female prison in the state. It's opened in 1913. It's still operating. They've got death row there. The only woman on death row is down there. And they even have a nursery down there. I don't know if you know this, but women can raise their children there for like 3 years.
Wow.
They give birth and raise their kids.
I
right
have
there.
heard of some prisons
So,
allowing stuff like that.
There's so
but-
much going on in the prisons. Normalcy, they got, like in the hole used to be the hole, but now it's the special management unit. And right? And it's different. But, you can still go to the store, and you still can get released for programs, and you plan watching TV, and
Yeah, you're not.
It's not the whole like it used to be, but I go down to Marysville, and I'm sitting at a table like this, and I'm talking to the warden, the deputy warden, and all that. And it was interesting because we gave her the whole spiel, the pitch for the Tier 1 Academy, and at the end of it, she looks at me and she says, "Well, how much?" And I'm like, "How much what?" And she's like, "How much is it going to cost us?" And I'm like, "Nothing." and you should have seen her eyes light up. She's like, "Nothing." Yeah, because they have budget for some programs. But Prison Fellowship doesn't charge them anything. The only thing we require is space, a place to hold the classes, and under certain memorandums, we need materials and saying. It's gotten tough now in the system to do certain things because, with paper and drugs and, now it's hard to get curriculum in there because, I'm not going to get into the specifics of how they're doing it. But let's just say that, we're no longer allowed to bring paper through the front gates. We have to have everything shipped through the warehouse, dog sniffed, that whole 9 yards. And that builds a
Google
whole...
it, David.
it builds a process, but we're going to do whatever we need to do to look. We look at the Department of Corrections and the people that play a major role, and they're heroes. I can't say that enough. I'm not a sellout. I'm telling you, the men and women that get up every day and put on that uniform and put their shoes on and walk into that environment, they need some extra credit for doing that because it's not an easy job. And we're glad to partner with them and be a part of the process of helping them do their jobs.
Sure.
So I can't say enough about that.
It's funny because you talk about now things with paper or whatever, and somebody the other day brought up AI, and I was like, oh well, fact that AI is taking over so much stuff, it allow people to be more creative. Like the stuff that I've watched, and these are just prison shows and things like that, but it's like the fucking creativity that brews in those when you have that many people that have come up with in some cases nothing, some cases everything, and everywhere in between, and every demographic. Like the level of creativity, if you could get them focused on something, like there is some power in there that could show them that, you know, hey, there's a much better opportunity for you to use this knowledge for something else. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't always become the case, right? They're looking at what's the first thing that I could get if I can turn paper into this.
Right.
But I wouldn't even think paper would ever be an issue of anything. So that just boggles my mind. Did you already find it?
No, I wasn't actually looking at that. Looking at something else, but because you can impregnate paper with acid and everything. You can put drugs in the paper, and then you just consume the paper. So that's the reason why, or other poisons or whatever you want to put on there.
Crazy. Either way. Yeah, so the creativity that goes in some of the stuff that they do. So now, obviously, you're working together with the prison. You guys are in a couple of different prisons now. And what is your role with the organization now?
My official title is Academy Program Manager with Prison Fellowship. With True Freedom Ministries, I'm a chaplain.
Okay.
I say I'm a senior employee or the senior contact for Prison Fellowship in Ohio because I'm in my 8th year of employment, and the guy that took over my position used to be one of my volunteers. So 4.5 years into me being a field director, I switched roles. You would think being a field director is a position that would be tougher because you're dealing with so many different prisons.
Yeah,
it's tougher to deal with one because if you're dealing with different ones every day, or you're dealing with the same one every day. The same one becomes a little bit more uphill of a battle because you're building actual relationships on a day-to-day basis and reputations and things like that. So it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah.
But I never thought that I would end up doing what I'm doing. I never thought in a million years that I would be like. I'll give you another example of how God has turned my whole life around. Is that recently me and Prison Fellowship went to Washington D.C. and we were lobbying for a law change for federal prison oversight to enact an ombudsman to go into the prison systems and the feds and put together an inspection committee to hold the institutions accountable to no overcrowding, the correct amount of programming, the right environment, and those types of things to make a more enabling environment to get. Look, I did some research, and this is very interesting. I did some independent research, and I looked up all the mission statements of all the departments of corrections throughout the United States, from Alaska all the way to Nebraska, and all the way through all the states. And most of those mission statements have two things in common, and that is protecting society. That's very common in those mission statements. And the other one is programming to re-educate the offender and restore them to society. That's a pretty good deal when you think about it.
Sure.
Because do you know what the mission statement is for China?
No.
Punish, punish, punish. The law, the law, the law. Right? Do you know what the mission statement is for Russia?
No.
Me either, because I couldn't find one.
Yeah.
They don't have a mission statement.
I mean,
it's
they
like,
were willing to
see you
lock
later,
up
goodbye.
Brittany Griner.
Goodbye, comrade. Right?
Yeah,
right.
Brittany Griner for that little nugget she had.
Think
with her.
about the movie Midnight Express on they're going to the Turkish prison, right? That was that's a crazy scene right there, man. That is a crazy reality, is that Turkey probably doesn't have a mission statement. Like, we don't care about re-education or helping people get back on their feet.
Oh, sure. I mean, even when we were in Iraq, like the prison centers that there, like you talk about, like, I mean, it was a concrete building with nothing. Like they slept on the floor, like no windows, no anything. Just
there's people crawling under razor wire to get to a meal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's parts of Cambodia, prisons and things like that. And you hear miserable stories coming out of some of these countries. And you think to yourself, these guys are over grafting, complaining about the food, right? Go relax on your rack and turn your TV down. You know what I mean?
Get seconds.
So we go to Washington, and I had the privilege of touring the Capitol. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Capitol.
Yeah.
You ever been to the Capitol?
Yeah.
Were you there on January 6th?
No,
Okay,
it's
so
not.
so listen.
Cover up the cameras.
So we go to the Capitol and we actually tour under the Capitol.
That's pretty
There's an
cool.
entire city under the Capitol with stores and shops and food and tunnels and trains, and it was amazing. And I'm walking with a team of people through the underground tunnels under the Capitol. Ted Cruz walked right by me, man.
That's
I'm
dope.
like, it was dope because
You're
he's
like,
one of
wow,
my.
this is where I'm at.
I like Senator Cruz, and I was like, I was the guy that was like, I wasn't like, oh, Senator Cruz. I was more like, hey, Senator Cruz, man, we love you. Thank you for what you do. He looked up at me, he's like, thank you, and I was like, you're welcome. But it was cool, man. I
Yeah.
connected with that guy for a second, you know. The stories that I like, I was a crackhead living homeless, you know, had no bearing to do anything in my life, and now I'm able to go and we met. With the staffers for JD Van, I'm over at the future vice president's office talking to them about changing law. What do you got here? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Those
yeah.
guys?
Yeah, those guys.
I know those guys.
Those are great guys, man. Yeah. Yeah. Those are my heroes, man. You know. Those guys are awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're right. Like you talk about that journey that you've taken, and then you're sitting there with the staff.
AI is amazing. It can do anything, dude. I mean,
Showed me without a beard. Wow. That's strange.
Well, I know we're already an hour and a half into this or so. I did have a couple other questions because you brought up prison systems, right? And we talked about the ability for these guys to rehab their lives.
I'm up
in a
at
sense.
4:30 tomorrow, getting ready to go into Grafton.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
I'll
like,
be-
you're ready to go. You're out
Yeah.
there. You're every day.
Well, I'm there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Fridays I'm at the Medina Jail, and then Saturdays I'm at GRC and Stark.
So, well, the reason I bring it up, you talked about all these shitty prisons in all these different countries. I don't know if you've ever watched like where they've done like Prisons of the World or Netflix or whatever.
World's toughest prisons.
Well, not even toughest. It was more so on the other side. It was like Norway was in there, and I don't remember all the countries off the hand, but I was really surprised at some of these countries and what their prisons are almost career centers, regards to the crime that you.
That's Norway.
Norway.
Yeah.
The Norwegian model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was curious, like, obviously, one, being there, two, being able to travel to all these different prisons. Like, what are some things that you wish would change about the systems that you see now to give people better, that you think would impact people in a positive way? Obviously, you
If
don't know if it's
I
right or wrong.
ran, like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're a kid, you're like, if I was president, right? So if I ran the
ice
entire
cream.
deal, and all we can do is influence, right? We tell our stories and we show what worked for us, and we try to influence the decision makers. I had the privilege, less than a week ago of being over in Amish country at the Amish door. And, you ever been out there? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Sugar Creek or wherever it is. I'm over there with the deputy director of the entire department, okay? Ed Banks. We were able to share and talk about practices and just listening to his knowledge of going from an early 90s CO all the way up to being the second in command of the whole department. What an incredible guy, an incredible story.
The whole department for the
Correct.
state?
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
Right. It's Annette Chambers Smith is the director, and then the deputy director is Ed Banks, and I got a funny story about him too. Like the first time I ever met him, he came to Grafton Correctional, and I introduced him by the wrong name, and it was a bad white guy affinity too, because I was like, "This is Director Jones." I want to throw myself off a cliff afterwards, like. I mean, what a dumb thing. There you go, Mr. Jones. You know what I mean? Like, oh, gosh, if I could have called him any other name in the world.
Fuck, Jones.
Yeah, right. It was a big
No.
mistake, right? Anyway,
pretty funny.
he's got a heart of gold, great guy, and knows his business, knows what he's doing. Excellent leadership, excellent person. What was your question again? Help me out.
Well,
So-
just what are some ideas that you think would actually impact the and
if
obviously
I
have that
were
conversation.
the person that had the reins of all the decision, I would like to see them say to every prisoner, if you get a bachelor's degree, we'll knock this great amount of time off your shoulders. Because and that should fit to certain crimes. Obviously, if you're an Anthony Sowell, it's not going to matter
Yeah,
if you
right.
get a bachelor's degree. You were killing prostitutes and burying them in your yard. You're a done deal. There's no hope for you. Like if you're eating people, you're done. So obviously, there's certain cases that you go, nah, that doesn't qualify. But I would like to see them take most of the drug offenses and most of the other, like most people who commit crimes of passion and things like that, and figure those things out. categorize them, and then say to that person, if you get a degree, we're going to send you home a lot earlier. Because anyone
Trump
who
impression right
actually
there.
pursues and gets that degree, and I'm not talking an associate's, although an associate's great, but if they can get a 4-year degree while they're there, that says something about their character, and they should be given a better opportunity. If you walk out of prison with a bachelor's degree and you can't make it in society, then obviously there's something else wrong with you. Maybe we revisit some sort of, well, I want to be careful about this too, because I don't really believe like the 3-strike law where you're like, well, after 2 robberies, if you go and, steal a bird from the park, you're going, you're going to prison for life.
I think
steal a pack of gum,
It's funny because I think a lot of the penalties, for instance, you steal a car, like what, 10 years? Seems reasonable.
Depends on the car, and it depends on whose car it was, right?
Well, yeah, but it seems reasonable. But then you think about it, and you're like, I mean, why did you steal the car? What happened? What caused him to
What's
do
your
so?
story?
Like, there's more to it, and unfortunately, there's just so much crime that you don't get a chance to. It's just not possible to get them all. It's all about the attorneys, the relationships they have with each other. The defendant and the prosecutor are going to lunch to discuss the 17 cases they have this afternoon, so they could get out of there in time to go golfing at 3:30. But it's I don't know where I was going with this. There's unfortunately there's so much, and the prison systems are obviously overloaded that it's hard to do those one-offs. But when you look at it and you think about all the people that are, doing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years relative to the crime they committed, and when you told me he was coming on, I started thinking about that, and I was like, fuck, 18 years, he must have done some fucking fucked up shit. And it's like, well, yeah, but compared to what?
Well,
and then the guy that is, I don't know, a junkie doing
Selling
drugs,
dope.
doing stuff like that, but then there's no way to also say that they're going to get out in 2 years instead of 6 and then be a better citizen, right? It's like, I don't envy the prison system and the responsibilities that they have to, like you said, rehab people for one.
And it's becoming more rehab friendly, but I've heard the question, how do you rehabilitate somebody who's never been habilitated?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a good
It's always a
question.
big sign for ourselves.
You do the best job that you can. I will tell you this, and this is going to go in my book, and nobody ever taught me this, but people have complained to me about the system, like, oh, the system's built against you, and it's made to make you fail, and it's a human warehouse, and it's the prison industrial complex, and you've heard all these like terms and everything. I think we have one of the best justice systems in the entire world, okay? And you don't hear that enough. Our system is built on trying to improve itself and trying to always do better and do right and try to fix its brokenness. Do people get lost in it? Yes. Are there unfortunate situations? Sure there are. Are there people that are sentenced to the death penalty that didn't even do anything? There are innocent people that get caught up in this monolith of a system. But I don't think that the system itself in its intentions is broken. I think we have a very good system. It's not broken. Now watch this. It's lazy. And you don't hear it described as that very much. I've never heard anyone else say it but me. I think it's true, though. I think it's lazy, and I know because I was in it. The problem is you get one case manager and 200 dudes in 200 cases. Right? How is everybody going to have their voice and their situation heard, which is kind of what you were just saying, is like, there's these people with these stories behind them. Who's going to hear their story?
Nobody.
You go through the court system. I will say the one thing that always plagued me in the back of my mind about the court system is that they always say to you, all right, we're going to give you 9 years. You ready to go? Go. All right. You're in the system. Did anybody promise you anything? No. You have to say no. Nobody's going to say, well, yeah, that guy said I was going to get 9 years.
Right.
You always got to go with the judge, the lawyer saying you got to say no. Anybody promise you anything? No, that's a lie.
Yeah, everybody in there fucking knows it too, right?
Right.
The judge knows that you got to sign the fucking agreement. It's not like you signed
It's just part of the process, and
Yeah.
it's broken. That part, I will say, has a brokenness to it. But I think it's more, if you really look at the whole system, it's lazy in that you can't, everybody is not going to get, well, not just their day in court. everybody's voice isn't going to be heard equally. And you know something else that's broken that isn't discussed very much, but
Is it broken or is it lazy?
This part's broken. This part's broken. All right. I get it. This part is broken, I think. They did some, I don't know, 2020 or 60-minute special some time ago where they showed this hot blonde teacher come in, and she's teaching this class of like 5th graders, and all the kids are like, wow, and they're all very transfixed on this pretty teacher, right? Mm. But then they do the same thing with this like out of shape, like, couch potato comes in and everybody's running and throwing spitballs and ignoring the teacher. Whether we like it or not, people judge off of what they see. And when you see some poor homeless minority standing there with, messed up teeth and ugly hair and everything, they're going to get a different, I believe sometimes they may even get a different set of justice, if they look intimidating. Some dudes just have a mean face, and they're not mean. They just have a face.
Yeah, right.
And you know how the statue of justice is holding the scales and it has a blindfold on?
Right.
What for?
Right.
Because every judge has a set of eyes.
Right.
Wouldn't it make more sense, and I know this is kind of radical, but wouldn't it make more sense to make every case a silhouette and you just judge off the facts?
I mean,
like person A did such and such. Here's their history.
Right.
Here's the facts of the matter. You ask person A a question. You hear a silhouette talk and a robot voice or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're not judging on that person short, tall, fat, skinny, black, white, none of that. You're judging based on the facts of the case and based on the history and what you can and what you can do going forward. I've never heard anybody talk about that either. But I mean, I'm actually saying that from a vantage point that would be diminishing to my own experiences, because I was a good-looking young man. And every time I stood in front of the judge, I was like, yeah, I'm the guy, right? And, he's a nice-looking young man. Give him a break, right? I lost all my hair, by the way. So, but 35, 40 years ago, man, I was better looking than this guy.
No, it's funny because I just went to court today to pay a speeding ticket. Thank you, Bucyrus, Ohio. Speed trap. But as I'm sitting in there, first of all, I'm pissed because I'm the last one to go. Be there at 2:00. I'm there at 1:40 because I'm ready to go. I want to make this quick and easy. Right. 3:30 before I got in there to talk to the prosecutor to get a speeding ticket waived. Anyhow, grateful it got waived. But like the people that I'm seeing in there, I'm like, well, fuck. What did that guy do?
All right.
What did that guy do? And then I'm sitting there, I'm looking at the other guy, and then who I look at the most though is the attorneys. Like, that attorney cost some fucking money, but he's an asshole. Like, he just let this dude sit here for 30 minutes, came back, blew him off when he asked him a question, and walked out because he's got 7 other cases going on in the courthouse the same day,
You got time for all that?
Well, that's what it is. And it's funny because you just watch people, and as a judge, how can you not watch things? And then let's face it, you talk about the prison system being lazy. How is the court system not lazy, right? When you talk about these guys, of course they're trying to do is they're literally getting 100 people through before lunch.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Look at that. That's you.
Listen, I saw Collier.
Whoa.
Collier used to bring 3 dudes in at a time and sentence them. Bam, 3. Bam, 3. And you're like, don't I get an independent hearing? So,
Good looking dude there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Almost like Bob Lee swagger, bro.
right. I got married and my wife, we had children, and she drained all the life out of me, right? And I turned
That's
old.
what they say. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, I'm sure we could talk for another hour. David, you got anything to add or anything you want to bring up?
Yeah, I got, I guess just to finish this off here.
You can bring a couple of things if you want.
I got like a real serious question and then one for fun. But I love your story, Rich Erd. And particularly the story of like how you met your wife, and I think you might be in a position to help us because we've got a Valentine's Day episode coming up with myself and a bunch of our single guy friends, and oh yeah, look at that.
I mailed that home.
Yeah, so I think you might be able to help us because, in hearing your story, how you met your wife, and then you mentioned the Marysville women's prison. So, are there this is the serious question, by the way, so they're like resources for like our single guys. We're trying Tinder, we're trying all these things, but
This is the serious question.
asking the
it
wrong
seems
guy.
there should be like a resource, that we might be able to find dates there.
At what, Marysville?
Yeah.
You'd have to get locked up. You could probably make that in 2025. I would recommend you get locked up, petition the government for the change. Get that change so you can get.
Get yourself a set of titties.
Yeah.
Listen, man.
God,
I
hopefully that
don't.
shit goes
Honestly,
away.
I don't know of any pen pal program or anything. And years ago, I did have a couple of girls when I was down at Noble that I was pen paling with at Marysville, but all that was like high charged testosterone butting up against an impossibility.
Right,
You know what
yeah,
I mean? It
it's
was
a-
like there's nothing happening. All you're doing is driving yourself nuts.
No pun
But
intended.
as a happily married man who's Christian and has a woman, look, I got a Proverbs 31 wife. I can't say enough about my wife, Debbie. She's the bomb.
Make sure you get to the mic. Sorry.
I can't say enough about my wife, Debbie. She's the bomb.
What's a Proverbs 31 wife?
Well, Proverbs 31, the entire chapter of Proverbs 31 talks about a woman of virtue, how the elders at the gate, that Proverbs 31 woman enhances that husband's reputation at the gates, makes him the talk of the town, that she works well with her hands, she provides for her children, she's trustworthy, she has virtue. Let me actually, instead of just talking about it, give you a little bit of it real quick, and then we can hear it. So this is what it says.
See how fast he is with this thing. Go. You're on the spot. Where's the Jeopardy music?
Here it is.
Go.
Let me get in the right version. All right. So, listen, my son, listen, son of my womb, listen, my son, the answers to my prayers. Do not spend your strength on women, your vigor on those who ruin kings. It is not for kings, Lemuel. It is for kings to drink wine, not for rulers to crave beer, lest they drink and forget what has been decreed and deprived all the oppressed of their rights. Let me move forward. Speak up and watch me be wrong. Here it is. So Proverbs 31, verse 10, it starts, a wife of noble character who can find. She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with her eager hands. She is like the merchant's ship, bringing her food from afar. She gets up while it is still night. She provides food for her family and portions for her female servants. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her tasks. She sees that her trading is profitable, and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand, she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes coverings for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Honor her for all that her hands have done, and let her works bring her praise at the city gates. Now that is a woman.
Hey, eat your fucking heart out, Hallmark. I'm gonna put that on a card.
We just lost all of our TikTok fans. They're just gone now.
My wife fulfills all that, other than the whole getting up while it's still dark thing. That is never gonna happen.
Yeah, I look at this is exactly what Debbie is to me and what she was to me for 9 years. She visited me.
Right.
She wrote me. She sent me food boxes, clothes boxes. She was a friend, and she didn't have to be.
Well, I was gonna say, you mentioned all the things she did for you. On the outside, how much shit did she take for what she was doing? Right? Like, I mean, hopefully she was surrounded by good people, but people are like, you're going to visit an inmate.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you haven't even hung out with this guy in person.
Yeah.
And 2 years into writing each other, you're going to marry a dude that's in jail for 9 years. Like, she had to go through quite a bit and be in her own kind of strength.
She came up to a visiting room at Grafton one day, and I was in a band called Deadly Sins, and the lead guitarist was a Cleveland Hells Angel, and the bass player was a Cleveland Hells Angel, and the drummer, and I'm up there, and I'm doing my, and she's sitting in the crowd, and some woman behind her is like, she's marrying him. Yeah. We have an incredible story. And I went through the foster system, and you would think with a felony through kidnapping, 2 aggravated burglaries, a robbery, another separate and unrelated robbery, and all the other assault and batteries, public detoxes, vandalisms, and fights, and all the other things I've been through, you would think that nobody would ever give me a chance to be a foster parent. But I did get licensed, and I went through the training. And Debbie and I are foster parents. And,
Really?
Yeah. And
Congratulations.
we just had 2 placements that just went home, but we had 2 boys for 6 months. And so our household was 5 boys, 12, 11, 7, 4, and 1.
Holy
man, 56. I'm changing diapers, dude. Pray for me, man. You know what I mean?
my
I need
gosh.
prayers, brother.
Oh.
So, but
Just
God-
when you think you're out, they drag you back in.
Right. But there's something to that, though, that God can do anything, man. And if you pursue excellence and you. I have a Secret Service agent as a very close mentor friend of mine who is a 30-year Secret Service agent. He was a special agent in charge of the Cleveland operations. He played for the Minnesota Twins. He was a pitcher. He's a good personal friend of mine and a mentor. In fact, he recommended me for the prison fellowship job. And how can you not get the job when you have a Secret Service as a
behind you.
reference,
Yeah.
right? I got U.S. Marshals as friends. I've got Homeland Security guys as friends. And I just I think differently than I did 25, 30 years ago about authority. Authority's not the problem. I was the problem.
Right.
When I was down at Texas at Death Row, they had a metal shop and they had all these different badges, like the metal craft work. It was the Polunsky unit. You can look it up. It's the worst prison in all of Texas. They've got the worst inmate down there, who's the most notorious inmate. I forget his name. It's Billy Wheaton or something like that. Like, assaulted 14 officers, just locked behind a door.
Damn.
Okay. And we're down there and we're touring. They got a leather shop. They got a metal shop. They got a radio station. In the metal shop, they had all these badges. And they make the badges for the Texas Rangers. They make the badges for the state police officers. And there was one hanging up there. It was Death Row, right? And I'm like, man, I like that badge. And they're like, you want it? I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, that belonged to Officer Lopez. He got fired. I'm like, serious, man? Give an ex-convict an old fired CO's badge? I'll take it.
Yeah.
So it's hanging in my truck out in your driveway. It's right outside right
That's
now.
awesome.
But yeah, man, God has done so many different things to change who I was and put me in a position to be able to help others. I haven't been, you know why God had, if you're a millionaire, your job as a Christian millionaire is to give to other people. God will equip you to give to other people. And so he's equipped me, and, with much equipping comes responsibilities to give and help others. So my job every day is to rise up and tell everybody else what he did for me. We can argue about Scripture.
Sure.
You can have a debate about what it means, what the Word of God says, and how we apply it. But one thing we can never argue about is what he did for me. You can't tell me what he did for me. Only I can tell you what he did for me. And that's the power of our word and our testimony.
Hell yeah, man. Let's end on that. That's fantastic. Appreciate you coming in, being a part of this, taking a Monday night away from the family and 3 kids, because you only got 3 right now, right?
Right.
Got a break.
Right.
The other 2
Yeah.
went
And you
back.
know what? Everybody, guys at church are saying, oh, and I'm like, what are you feeling bad for? We're celebrating. Maybe, it is bittersweet. And we love those 2 boys. But we know they're going back to their grandmother, and it's a good thing.
Awesome.
There's a bittersweetness when your 7-year-old is crying that his playmate went home.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
you're dealing with that. But then there's also joy in that now we're walking in the store with, 2 down on 5. Man, it's freedom, baby.
Yeah,
So,
sweet. No
yeah.
poopy diapers.
Yeah, for
Let's
now.
go.
For now.
Right.
We're hoping God may. The reason we got into fostering is because Debbie and I no longer are having children. I'm 56. I'm not Mick Jagger over here. And we're hoping that we can maybe get a daughter to break up all the testosterone, because all we
Yeah.
have is boys. And she wants somebody to bake cookies with, and
Do some of that fun
stitching with and all
stuff. Go
that.
shopping with, and do some girl stuff.
Pick flax with, and like help me sit at the city gate.
Yeah, of course. David, you got anything else?
No.
Sean, anything?
Appreciate
No,
you
no.
guys.
Appreciate
being
you
on for
hooking us
sure.
up. It's been a pleasure.
God bless.
Hell of a story lesson, and hopefully we can have you back, and I'm sure we will.
Yeah, bring me on with Ray sometime. He's cool. I like Ray.
Yeah. Ray was
Sacred
supposed to be here,
Ministries,
but
yeah.
he decided to just hang out at work. Or
He
something.
knew he wouldn't get in a word in edgewise with me.
Probably. All right. Well, thanks again, and good night, everybody.
We got something to say.